The Force binds all things across the galaxy, connecting every living being in an invisible web of light and darkness, destiny and choice. For 1,000 generations, the Jedi Knights were the guardians of peace and justice. But in the waning days of the Clone Wars, that ancient order faced its darkest hour, not in honorable battle, but through betrayal, orchestrated by the most patient predator the Sith had ever produced. Chancellor Palpatine, secretly the Sith Lord Darth Sidious, had woven a web so intricate that even the wisest Jedi Masters could not perceive its full scope until the trap had already sprung. Yet the Force moves in mysterious ways, and in infinite possibilities across infinite timelines. There exists one where a single moment of clarity, one flash of prescient understanding, changed everything. This is the story of what happened when Grandmaster Yoda made a different choice in the Senate chamber and killed Emperor Palpatine before the Empire could truly begin. If you want to see more alternate Star Wars timelines exploring the galaxy's greatest what-if moments, hit that subscribe button and drop your favorite what-if scenario in the comments below. May the Force be with you. The Senate chamber was a ruin. Hovering platforms lay scattered across the vast circular arena like broken teeth, some still sparking with damaged repulsor systems. The air reeked of ozone and melted plasteel. High above, the vaulted ceiling bore scorch marks from errant Force lightning, black streaks that would become historical artifacts, evidence of the day too. Ancient orders clashed in the heart of galactic civilization. Yoda stood on a Senate pod suspended 15 meters above the chamber floor, his green blade humming with steady purpose. Across from him, separated by a gulf of air and philosophy, Darth Sidious perched like a carrion bird, his yellow eyes blazing with Sith fury. The Dark Lord's face, no longer hidden behind the mask of Palpatine's grandfatherly concern, was a twisted landscape of hatred given flesh. Die, you will not, Sidious hissed, his voice layered with the power of the dark side. Inevitable, my victory is. Foreseen it, I have. Lightning erupted from the Sith Lord's hands, a torrent of violet-white energy that screamed across the gap between platforms. Yoda's lightsaber moved in a blur, the ancient Jedi Master's mastery of form for allowing him to redirect the deadly current. The lightning split and arced away, scarring Senate pods and leaving the smell of burning circuitry in its wake. This confrontation had been building for years, perhaps for centuries. The Sith had hidden in the shadows, since their apparent destruction, at the Battle of Risen, a millennium of patience and planning culminating in this single man's rise to absolute power. Palpatine had been elected Supreme Chancellor through manipulation and manufactured crisis. He had orchestrated a galaxy-spanning war, playing both sides against each other while the Jedi died by the thousands on distant battlefields. And when his true nature was finally exposed, when Anakin Skywalker had revealed the Chancellor's identity to Mace Windu, the trap had sprung with devastating efficiency. Mace was dead. Anakin had fallen to the dark side. Order 66 had been transmitted across the galaxy, turning the clone army against their Jedi generals in a coordinated purge of unprecedented scale. Yoda had felt each death through the Force. Bright lights suddenly extinguished. Screams cut short, the anguish of betrayal echoing across parsecs. Thousands of Jedi, slaughtered by the soldiers they had fought beside for 3 years. The Senate pod beneath. Yoda's feet lurched as Sidious hit it with a concentrated blast of Force energy. The ancient Jedi leapt, somersaulting through the air as the platform exploded in a shower of debris. He landed on another pod, already moving, his small form a green and brown blur of motion that defied his 900 years. Understand, you do not, Yoda called out, his voice carrying across the chamber despite its gravelly rasp. Already lost, you have revealed yourself. Your great mistake is. Sidious laughed, the sound echoing off durasteel walls, designed to amplify the speeches of 1,000 senators. Lost. I have won, Master Yoda. Even now, your precious Jedi Order burns. The Republic is mine to reshape. And you will die here, forgotten and alone, while I reshape the galaxy in my image. The Sith Lord thrust both hands forward, and the Force itself seemed to scream in protest. A wave of pure telekinetic power rippled outward, tearing Senate pods from their moorings and hurling them at Yoda like massive projectiles. The Jedi Master's eyes closed for the briefest instant. In that fraction of a second, the Force spoke to him with crystalline clarity. He saw two paths stretching into the future. In one, he fled, escaped the Senate building, went into exile, preserved himself for a distant hope named Luke Skywalker. That path led to decades of hiding, to Dagobia's swamps, to watching the galaxy suffer under Imperial tyranny, while he waited for prophecy to fulfill itself. It was the cautious path, the survivor's path, the path his wisdom had always counseled. In the other path, he saw something different. He saw the moment just ahead, the single heartbeat where Sidious would overextend, where the Dark Lord's arrogance would create an opening that would never come again. He saw the cost of taking that opening, the Force wound it would create, the chaos it would unleash, the suffering that would come from removing such a powerful piece from the galactic game board. But he also saw something the Sith Lord could not, that some victories are won not through patience, but through decisive action when the moment presents itself. Yoda's eyes snapped open, and he made his choice. The Senate pods hurtling toward him suddenly reversed direction, caught by the ancient Jedi's will and sent screaming back at their originator. Sidious snarled and unleashed another torrent of Force lightning. But Yoda was already moving. The small Jedi Master launched himself across the gap between platforms, his lightsaber held in both hands, his entire being focused into a single point of luminous purpose. The Force itself seemed to bend around him, light-side energy coalescing into a brilliant aura that burned away the shadows Sidious had cast across the chamber. The Dark Lord's eyes widened, not with fear, for Sith Lords do not fear, but with sudden, terrible understanding. He had miscalculated. Yoda's blade pierced Darth Sidious's chest just as the Sith Lord's lightning enveloped them both. The ancient Jedi's body spasmed as dark side energy coursed through him, burning nerve endings and stopping his hearts. But his grip on his lightsaber never wavered. He drove the blade deeper, angling upward, the green plasma burning through the physical vessel that housed one of the most powerful dark side practitioners in galactic history. Sidious screamed, not the theatrical cry he had used to summon clone troopers when fighting Mace Windu, but a genuine sound of shock and agony. His lightning intensified, becoming erratic, wild streamers of energy that scorched the walls and ceiling. His yellow eyes locked onto Yoda's, and in them the Jedi Master saw rage, disbelief, and the first seeds of genuine fear. Impossible, the Sith Lord gasped. Foreseeing this, I did not. The dark side clouds everything, Yoda said quietly, his voice steady despite the pain racking his body. Blinded by your own power, you were. A prisoner of your vision, you became. The future, always in motion it is. He twisted the lightsaber. Palpatine, Sidious, the architect of the Clone Wars and would-be Emperor of the Galaxy, died with a final spasm of dark side energy that blasted outward in a spherical wave. Yoda was thrown backward, his small body tumbling through the air before crashing into a Senate pod with bone-breaking force. The chamber fell silent except for the hiss and spark of damaged systems. The Jedi Master lay still, his breathing shallow, his lightsaber extinguished and fallen from his grasp. But through the Force, he felt something that filled him with both hope and dread across the galaxy, like a vidscreen being switched off. The presence of Darth Sidious simply ceased to exist. The shadow that had been growing over the Force for decades suddenly vanished, leaving a void that echoed with its absence. And in the barracks and battlefields of 1,000 worlds, clone troopers paused mid-execution, their inhibitor chips suddenly receiving conflicting signals from a command structure that no longer existed. The Jedi Temple burned. Smoke rose from the ziggurat's highest spires, visible across Coruscant's endless cityscape as emergency vehicles swarmed like insects around a wounded beast. Inside the temple's grand halls, between columns that had stood for 1,000 years, bodies lay in scattered groups, Padawans cut down as they fled, temple guards who had died defending their charges, instructors who had made final stands in doorways and meditation chambers. Anakin Skywalker stood in the temple's central computer core, his new yellow eyes reflecting the glow of burning data terminals. His black robes were scorched and stained, his breathing heavy not from exertion, but from the weight of what he had done. Around him, the 501st Legion, his troops, who had marched with him through the Clone Wars, who had trusted him, maintained perimeter security with their blasters trained on shadows. The young Sith Lord's comlink crackled. Lord Vader, came Commander Appo's voice, professional and empty of emotion. We've swept the lower levels. All targets neutralized. The temple is secure. Anakin didn't respond immediately. His flesh hand, the one that still remembered being human, clenched and unclenched at his side. The mechanical fingers of his right hand remained perfectly still. He had come here on his master's orders. He had done what needed to be done to save Padme, to gain the power to prevent death itself. The younglings had been necessary, a test of his commitment to the dark side, a baptism in blood that would make him strong enough to save the woman he loved. That's what his master had promised. But something was wrong. The connection he had felt to Darth Sidious, that dark thread of power and purpose that had guided him since he'd taken his first steps on this path mere hours ago, had suddenly vanished. It hadn't faded or weakened. It had simply ceased to exist, as though someone had cut a tether he hadn't realized he was holding. My lord, Appo's voice came again, more insistent. Are you receiving? I hear you, Commander, Anakin said, his voice deeper than it had been as a Jedi, roughened by the dark side and by screams he'd barely remember in years to come. Status of the other teams? There was a pause. When Appo spoke again, something had changed in his tone, a crack in the perfect soldier's composure. That's why I'm contacting you, sir. We're receiving fragmented reports from across the city. Multiple clone units are reporting confusion, requesting clarification on Order 66. Anakin's eyes narrowed. What kind of confusion? Some units executed the order as programmed. Others hesitated. And some. Appo hesitated. And through their years of fighting together, Anakin could hear the unease beneath the clone's disciplined exterior. Some units are reporting that they don't understand why they fired on their Jedi commanders. They're asking for medical evaluation, suggesting their inhibitor chips malfunctioned. Ice flooded through Anakin's veins. He reached out through the Force, searching for the dark presence that had consumed the Senate chamber, the power that had promised him everything he needed. Emperor Palpatine, Darth Sidious, the master who would teach him to save Padme from the death he'd seen in his visions. Nothing. The void where his master should have been was absolute and terrifying. Commander, Anakin said slowly, have you received any communication from the Emperor in the last 10 minutes? Another pause. Negative, my lord. Last transmission was your orders to secure the temple. All subsequent attempts to raise the Chancellor's office have gone unanswered. Anakin's heart, the organic one that still beat in his chest, despite everything, began to race. He had felt deaths through the Force before, even through the red haze of the dark side. When his mother had died in his arms on Tatooine, when he'd felt Jedi fall during the war. But this was different. This wasn't just death. This was erasure. He spun on his heel and strode toward the temple's main entrance, his cape billowing behind him. Clone troopers snapped to attention as he passed, their armor still smoking from blaster fire. They'd exchanged with their former allies. The temple steps were slick with rain that had begun to fall, mixing with ash and blood to create dark rivulets that flowed down toward the plaza below. A Republic gunship touched down at the base of the steps, its side doors already sliding open. Anakin leapt down the last 20 steps in a single, Force-enhanced bound that would have been impossible for a normal human. He landed in a crouch, the impact cracking the duracrete beneath his boots, and stalked into the gunship's troop bay. Senate building, he ordered. Maximum speed. The pilot, another member of the 501st, nodded and lifted off without question. As Coruscant skylanes blurred past the open doors, Anakin reached out through the Force again, this time not searching for his master, but for the one person whose light still called to him despite the darkness he'd embraced. Padme. He found her presence immediately, alive, terrified. Her Force signature blazing with emotional turmoil in her apartment across the city. She didn't know. She couldn't know what he'd done, what he'd become. When this was over, when he understood what had happened to Sidious, he would go to her. He would explain. She would understand that everything he'd done was for her. To save her, to keep her from the death he'd foreseen. She had to understand. The gunship banked hard, joining an emergency corridor reserved for official traffic. Below, The Senate district spread out like a monument to bureaucracy and power. The Senate building itself dominated the landscape, a massive, mushroom-shaped structure that housed representatives from thousands of worlds. But something was wrong. Emergency vehicles clustered around the main entrance. Clone trooper detachments were establishing security perimeters, and rising from the building's central chamber, a thin column of smoke suggested catastrophic damage. They landed on a restricted platform, typically reserved for senators and high-ranking officials. Red Guard, the elite protectors who served the chancellor, stood at attention. Near the entrance, their crimson robes and masks perfect and terrifying. But as Anakin approached, he noticed something off about their posture. They stood too rigidly, as though at attention for an authority that was no longer present to witness their discipline. Lord Vader, one of them said, the voice modulator in his helmet making the words sound flat and emotionless. We were not informed of your arrival. Where is the Emperor? Anakin demanded. The guard's helmet turned slightly, an almost human gesture of confusion. The Emperor, my lord? Palpatine. Chancellor Palpatine. Where is he? The Chancellor. The guard paused, and even through the helmet, Anakin could sense uncertainty. The Senate chamber. There was an altercation. Master Yoda was here. Anakin didn't wait for more. He pushed past the guards, moving through corridors he knew well from countless meetings during the war. Staff members and Senate security scattered before him, their eyes widening at the sight of his new appearance. The yellow Sith eyes, the dark robes, the rage that rolled off him in waves that needed no force sensitivity to perceive. The doors to the Senate chamber hung open, one of them torn completely from its massive hinges. Anakin stepped through and stopped, his breath catching despite years of training to control such physical reactions. The chamber was devastation incarnate. Hundreds of Senate pods lay scattered across the floor or hung at odd angles from damaged moorings. Scorch marks covered nearly every surface. The air still crackled with residual force energy, both light and dark, mixing in a nauseating cocktail that made even the dark side within Anakin recoil. And in the center of it all, on a platform that had somehow remained intact, lay a body. Anakin recognized the robes first, the deep burgundy and black that Palpatine had worn for official functions, the careful tailoring that had masked the predator beneath the politician's skin. He moved forward, each step echoing in the ruined chamber, until he stood over the corpse of the man who had been Supreme Chancellor, who had been Darth Sidious, who had promised him the power to save everything he loved. The lightsaber wound through. The chest was unmistakable, clean, precise, fatal, and nearby, being tended to by a medical droid that must have arrived moments earlier, lay the small green form of Master Yoda. The ancient Jedi's eyes opened as Anakin approached. They were filled with pain and exhaustion, but they still held that terrible wisdom that had always made Anakin feel like a child being gently corrected. Blood matted the fur around Yoda's mouth. His breathing came in shallow gasps. But he lived, and Palpatine did not. Anakin, Yoda whispered, his voice barely audible over the medical droid's diagnostics. Felt your fall, I did. Through the Force, touched by darkness you are. But too late to stop it, I was. Anakin ignited his lightsaber, the blade that had been blue when he was a Jedi now burned crimson. Powered by a Kyber crystal he'd corrupted through pain and hatred. The medical droid chirped in alarm and retreated. Yoda didn't move, couldn't move. His small body, too broken from the confrontation with Sidious. You killed him, Anakin said, his voice shaking with rage and something else, something that might have been fear, or grief, or the terrible understanding of what he'd lost. You killed my master. Your master, Yoda repeated, and even broken and dying. There was profound sadness in those words. Led you to darkness, he did. Destroyed the Jedi, through you. But ended it as now. Stop, this madness must. Anakin's blade hummed inches from Yoda's throat. One movement, one strike. He could kill the Jedi Master, avenge his master, complete his journey to the dark side. But something held him back, not mercy, not the lingering ghost of the Jedi he'd been, but simple, terrible arithmetic. Palpatine had promised him the power to save Padme from death. That power was supposed to come from the dark side, from teachings that the Sith Lord would share after Anakin proved himself worthy. But Palpatine was dead. The knowledge died with him. and Anakin had slaughtered the Jedi Temple, murdered children, betrayed everything he believed in, for a promise that would never be fulfilled. No, he whispered, the word torn from somewhere deep and wounded. No, he said. He said he could save her. He promised. Lied. The Sith always do, Yoda said gently. Save your wife, you cannot. But lose her, you do not have to. Still time there is. Still choice. Anakin's blade trembled. Around them, the Force itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the decision that would shape everything that followed. In that moment, the future hung perfectly balanced, not between light and dark, but between the man Anakin Skywalker had been and the monster Darth Vader was becoming. Then, from his comlink, Commander Appo's voice crackled. Lord Vader, urgent. We're receiving reports of Jedi survivors, rallying at multiple locations across the galaxy. Without direct Imperial command, some clone units are standing down. The purge is failing. Repeat, Order 66 is failing. Request immediate instructions. The spell broke. Anakin looked down at Yoda, at the Jedi Master who had killed his chance at saving Padme, and made his choice. Secure Master Yoda, he said into the comlink, his voice cold and dead. He's to be held for trial, and transmit new orders to all clone battalions. Order 66 remains in effect until every Jedi is eliminated. If they won't obey the chips, they'll obey me. He looked down at Yoda one final time. You took everything from me, so I'll take everything from you. Your order, your Jedi. Every last one of them will die, and then I'll figure out how to save her myself. He turned and walked away, leaving Yoda in the care of medical droids and clone troopers, leaving the body of Darth Sidious to become evidence in a conspiracy that would reshape galactic politics for decades to come. Behind him, too quiet for anyone but a Jedi to hear, Yoda whispered, "Begun, the true war has." The outer rim world of Felucia had been beautiful once. Its fungal forests stretched for thousands of kilometers. Bioluminescent organisms, creating natural light, shows that early explorers had described as stepping into a fever dream painted by gods. During the Clone Wars, the Separatists had fortified key positions among the massive mushroom trees, turning paradise into a meat grinder where Republic forces died by the thousands trying to secure strategic resources. Jedi Master Aayla Secura had been leading the 327th Star Corps through one of those fungal forests when Order 66 transmitted across the galaxy. Commander Bly, her friend, her trusted second-in-command, the man who had saved her life on Onager, and shared quiet conversations during long hyperspace journeys, had raised his blaster along with a dozen other clones. The first shot had taken her in the back, between the shoulder blades, the impact throwing her forward into bioluminescent moss that glowed brighter as her blood soaked into it. She should have died there. The clones should have continued firing until they were certain, until they'd verified the kill and moved on to their next objective. But something had happened in that moment between the first volley and the second. Commander Bly had suddenly stumbled, his blaster wavering. His helmet turned toward his hands as though they belonged to someone else. What? His voice over the comlink had been confused, horrified. What did we? General Secura. Aayla had dragged herself behind a massive mushroom trunk, her Jedi training allowing her to function despite the blaster wound that burned through her back. She'd heard the confusion rippling through the clone ranks, some demanding they finish the job, others asking why they'd fired, still others caught in the middle of that cognitive dissonance and simply freezing in place. She'd run, wounded, betrayed, but alive, and through the Force, as she'd fled deeper into Felucia's wilderness. She'd felt it, the sudden absence of Darth Sidious's dark presence, like an infected wound being cauterized from the galaxy. Now, 3 hours later, she sat in a shallow cave formed by intersecting fungal roots, her robes torn and blood-stained, her comlink held in trembling hands as she listened to emergency broadcasts bouncing between Republic channels. Chancellor Palpatine confirmed dead. Master Yoda in custody. Charges of assassination. Order 66 status uncertain. Clone forces reporting conflicting. Jedi Temple attacked. Casualties unknown. Lord Vader assumes emergency command of. Aayla switched off the comlink before she could hear more. Lord Vader. She didn't need the Force to know who that was. She'd felt Anakin's fall like a scream across the galaxy. His bright presence in the Force suddenly twisted into something dark and agonized. The Chosen One, the hero of the Clone Wars, had become something else entirely. And now Palpatine was dead, killed by Master Yoda. But instead of salvation, it felt like the galaxy had simply traded one nightmare for a different one. She reached into her utility belt and pulled out a small holocommunicator, a special encrypted model that the Jedi Council had distributed to masters for emergency communication. Her fingers hesitated over the activation switch. If she used it, she might find other survivors. She might also alert whatever forces were hunting them to her position. She activated it anyway. The blue holographic field flickered to life, displaying a transmission cue that made her heart sink. Of the 20 Jedi Masters who had been issued these communicators, only 7 signals remained active. 7, out of an order that had numbered 10,000 before the war began. Perhaps 300 combat-capable Jedi Masters by the war's end. One signal blinked insistently, an active transmission request. Ayla accepted it. The hologram resolved into the scarred features of Master Quinlan Vos, her former Padawan and longtime friend. His dark hair was matted with blood, and deep lacerations covered his face and arms. Behind him, she could see the interior of what looked like a cargo freighter's hold. "Ayla," he said, relief flooding his voice. "Thank the Force. I wasn't sure if anyone would answer." "Quinlan," her own voice cracked. "Where are you?" "Currently, hyperspace, heading for the Kornak cluster. Managed to steal a ship on Kashyyyk." After the clones turned, his expression darkened. "The Wookiees helped me escape. Paid for it, too. I saw them gunned down by their own clone garrison for harboring a Jedi." Ayla closed her eyes. The Wookiees of Kashyyyk had been staunch Republic allies. Their loyalty never questioned. That they would suffer for helping. Jedi Escape spoke to how complete this purge was meant to be. "Have you heard from anyone else?" she asked. "Bits and pieces. Ki-Adi-Mundi is dead, confirmed by clone forces on Megiddo. Plo Koon's starfighter was shot down over Cato Neimoidia. Stas Ali killed on Salakami." Quinlan's jaw tightened. "But some survived the initial purge. Obi-Wan's signal is active. So are Luminara Unduli, Shak Ti, and Master Romkoda. And Master Yoda lives. He's being held on Coruscant, under arrest for assassinating Palpatine." Ayla absorbed this. The broadcast said Palpatine was the Sith Lord, that he orchestrated the war. He did. Quinlan leaned closer to his holocom, his voice dropping. "I've been monitoring. Imperial communications. They haven't changed the encryption codes yet. Sloppy of them. Yoda fought Sidious in the Senate chamber and killed him. But the cost." He shook his head. Order 66 had already been transmitted. The temple was already under attack. And without Sidious's direct control, the inhibitor chips in the clones are malfunctioning. Some units are still executing Jedi on sight. Others have stopped, confused. And some are having full psychological breaks as they realize what they've done. Commander Bly hesitated. Ayla said quietly. "He shot me, but then he stopped." I heard the confusion in his voice. The chips were designed to suppress the clones. Natural resistance to killing their Jedi commanders. With Sidious dead, the signal that was reinforcing those commands is gone. The chips are still active, but without that Sith influence. Quinlan ran a hand through his hair. "It's chaos. And in that chaos, Anakin Skywalker, now calling himself Darth Vader, has assumed command." The name sent ice through Ayla's veins. She had fought beside Anakin during the war. She'd seen his brilliance in battle, his fierce loyalty to his troops, his inability to accept loss. She'd also seen the darkness in him, the anger he barely controlled, the attachment to Senator Amidala that violated every precept of the Jedi Code, the fear that drove so many of his decisions. "He attacked the temple," she said, and it wasn't a question. Quinlan nodded grimly. "Led the 501st himself. Killed everyone inside, including the younglings." He paused. His psychometric abilities, allowing him to sense emotions across even a holographic connection. "I can feel your shock, Ayla. But you knew him. Did you ever really believe he would stay in the light?" She wanted to argue, to defend the young man who had been knighted after Geonosis, who had saved so many during the war. But honesty compelled her to admit, "I hoped. But no, I wasn't surprised." A second holographic window opened in the transmission, overlaying the first. Master Obi-Wan Kenobi appeared, his robes scorched and his face aged a decade beyond. The mere hours since the order had fallen. Behind him, Ayla glimpsed red rock formations. Utapau, perhaps, or Tatooine. Quinlan. Ayla. Obi-Wan's voice carried the weight of fresh grief. I'm glad you both survived. Master Kenobi, Ayla said. Where are you? Tatooine. He stopped, composing himself with visible effort. I went to the temple, saw the recordings. Anakin led the attack. He's fallen completely to the dark side. We know, Quinlan said. The question is, what do we do about it? We survive, Obi-Wan said firmly. We preserve what remains of the order. We find the other survivors and disappear before Vader and whatever remains of Sidious's apparatus can hunt us down, run and hide. Quinlan's voice carried an edge. Ayla recognized the part of him that had always chafed under the Council's caution, that had once infiltrated Count Dooku's inner circle and nearly fallen to the dark side himself. While the Sith reshaped the galaxy, while clone troopers who were our friends either continue murdering Jedi or go insane from what they've been forced to do, what would you have us do? Obi-Wan shot back. Storm Coruscant? Rescue Yoda from whatever prison they're holding him in. There are perhaps 100 Jedi left in the entire galaxy, Quinlan. 100 out of 10,000. We are not an army. We are refugees. A third window opened. Master Shakti appeared. The Togruta Jedi's montrals bearing fresh scorch marks from blaster fire. Her background showed the cloning facilities of Kamino. The endless rain hammering against transparisteel viewports. You're both wrong, she said without preamble. Master Kenobi, we cannot simply hide and hope the galaxy forgets us. The Empire, and yes, it will be an empire. Make no mistake, will hunt us until every last Jedi is dead. And Quinlan, a direct assault is suicide. But there is a third option, which is, Ayla asked. We rescue Master Yoda, Shakti said calmly. Not as a statement of strength, but because we need him. He killed Darth Sidious. He knows things about the Sith's plans that died with Palpatine. And more importantly, he carries the moral authority of the Order. If we're to survive, if we're to rebuild, we need our Grand Master. You're talking about infiltrating Coruscant, Obi-Wan said. The most heavily fortified planet in the galaxy, where Vader now commands tens of thousands of clone troopers and whatever remains of Palpatine's security apparatus. I'm talking about saving our teacher, Shakti replied quietly. The one who made the choice we were all too afraid to make. He killed a Sith Lord, Obi-Wan, while we were scattered across the galaxy fighting a war we didn't understand. Yoda ended it. The least we can do is ensure his sacrifice wasn't in vain. The 4 holographic images hung in the air of Ayla's cave. 4 Jedi Masters representing the tattered remnants of an ancient order. The silence stretched, broken only by the ambient sounds of their respective locations. Felicia's fungal forest rustling outside Ayla's cave, the hum of Quinlan's stolen freighter, the wind howling across Tatooine's wastes, the rain hammering Kamino's platforms. Finally, Obi-Wan spoke. If we do this, it cannot be a frontal assault. We'll need intelligence, access codes, an understanding of where Yoda is being held and how heavily he's guarded. I can get that, Quinlan said immediately. My psychometry works through the Force. If I can touch something from the Senate building or wherever they're holding him, I can read its history. And I have contacts, people who aren't Jedi but who might help for the right price. I can reach out to the clone commanders I trust. Ayla said, surprised to hear herself volunteering. Not all of them will have succumbed to the chips. Some of them are still fighting the programming. If we can find allies among the clones themselves. I have the clone DNA database, Shakti said, and access to the Kaminoan cloners. If the inhibitor chips are malfunctioning, perhaps we can find a way to deactivate them entirely. Free the clones from Sidious's final command. Obi-Wan was quiet for a long moment. Then, this is dangerous. More dangerous than anything we faced during the war. If we fail, the Jedi Order ends with us. If we succeed, he trailed off. If we succeed, we get Yoda back, Ayla finished. And maybe, just maybe, we start to undo some of the damage Sidious caused. Very well, Obi-Wan said. his voice carrying the weight of command he'd earned through 3 years of war. But we do this intelligently. No heroics, no grand gestures. We plan, we prepare, and we strike only when we're certain of success. Agreed. 3 affirmatives came in response. Then let's begin, Obi-Wan said. May the Force be with us, because I suspect we're going to need all the help we can get. The holographic windows closed, leaving Ayla alone in her cave on Felucia. Outside, the bioluminescent forest continued its eternal light show, beautiful and alien and utterly indifferent to the fate of the Jedi Order. She stood, testing her wounded back. The pain was manageable, Jedi. Healing techniques had already begun knitting tissue and sealing blood vessels. She would bear a scar, a permanent reminder of Commander Bly's blaster bolt, and the moment everything changed. But she would bear it as a survivor, not as a victim. Ayla Secura gathered her few belongings, checked her lightsaber one final time, and stepped out into the fungal forest. Somewhere in the galaxy, Master Yoda sat in a cell. The Jedi Master who had done what none of them had dared. Confront the darkness at its source and destroy it. They would not abandon him, even if saving him meant confronting Darth Vader, the fallen chosen one who now commanded the scattered remnants of Palpatine's war machine, even if it meant walking into the heart of enemy territory with no guarantee of success, because that's what Jedi did. Even when there were only 100 of them left. The Imperial Palace had been the Republic executive, building less than 12 hours ago. Now, as Coruscant's artificial dawn broke over the planet-wide city, work crews labored around the clock to transform it into a monument to the new order. Red and black banners bearing the Imperial crest, a stylized representation of authority and unity, replaced the Republic's blue and silver stormtrooper patrols, their armor freshly painted in the stark white that would become synonymous with Imperial oppression, marched through corridors where senators had once debated galactic policy. In the building's sublevels, far from the propaganda being erected above, Grand Moff Wilhoff Tarkin stood before a reinforced cell and contemplated the galaxy's new reality. The cell's occupant sat in meditation posture on a simple bench, his small form appearing almost childlike in the austere chamber. But Tarkin had served in the Clone Wars long enough to know that Grand Master Yoda was anything but harmless. The ancient Jedi had killed Supreme Chancellor Palpatine, the most powerful being in the galaxy, architect of a conspiracy spanning decades, with a lightsaber thrust precise, enough to pierce through Force lightning and Sith sorcery. Master Yoda, Tarkin said, his crisp outer rim accent carrying through the ray shield that separated them. I trust your accommodations are adequate. Yoda's eyes opened slowly. Adequate they are, for a prison. But call them what they are, Governor Tarkin. Pretend otherwise, we should not. Grand Moff, actually, Tarkin corrected. The rank was among Lord Vader's first official appointments. The military must be reorganized if we're to maintain order during this transition. Transition, Yoda repeated, the word carrying layers of irony. From republic to empire, you mean? From freedom to tyranny. Pleasant words for unpleasant truths. Tarkin's expression didn't change. He had long ago mastered the art of emotional control, a skill that had served him well in navigating the Clone Wars' complex politics. From chaos to order. Master Yoda, surely you recognize that the Republic was failing. The Senate had become paralyzed by procedure. The separatist crisis proved that democratic institutions couldn't respond to existential threats with sufficient speed or decisiveness. And so, execute all the Jedi you must? Yoda's voice remained mild, conversational, but Tarkin caught the steel beneath. Murder thousands of peacekeepers? Turn an army of loyal soldiers into assassins? This is order. That, Tarkin said carefully, was Palpatine's contingency. Order 66 was his creation, embedded in the clone programming before the war even began. With his death, the command has become problematic. This was the core issue that had dominated emergency meetings throughout the night. Order 66 should have been absolute. Every clone trooper in the Grand Army of the Republic, simultaneously turning on their Jedi commanders, executing them without hesitation or remorse. The inhibitor chips implanted in every clone's brain had been designed to override loyalty, friendship, even the clone's own sense of self. But Darth Sidious had died before the purge was complete, and without the Sith Lord's dark side influence reinforcing the chip's programming, the results had been catastrophic in their inconsistency. Approximately 60% of clone units had executed Order 66 as intended. Their Jedi commanders were dead, the missions completed with mechanical efficiency. These units continued to function normally, reporting for duty and accepting new orders from Imperial Command without question. 20% had hesitated or failed to execute completely. Some had fired warning shots, allowing their Jedi to escape. Others had experienced momentary malfunctions before completing the order. These units were being recalled for evaluation and chip reinforcement. The final 20% were disasters. Clones who had killed their Jedi commanders were experiencing severe psychological trauma as they realized what they'd done. Some were catatonic. Others had become violent, turning their weapons on fellow clones or Imperial officers. A few had committed suicide. The Kaminoans were scrambling to understand why some chips had failed while others held firm. Problematic, Yoda echoed. Create an army of slaves, Sidious did. Chain them to his will. And now, broken those chains are, the slaves remember their crimes. The clones are not slaves, Tarkin said sharply. They're soldiers, bred and trained for military service. Their loyalty to the Republic was never in question. Except when ordered to murder their friends, Yoda said quietly. Except when forced to betray everything they fought for. Slaves they are, Tarkin. And freed them, my action did. Foreseen this, Sidious had not. Tarkin studied the ancient Jedi with new appreciation. You're saying you knew this would happen? That killing Palpatine would break his control over the clones? Knew? No. Yoda shook his head. Hoped. A chance worth taking it was. But certain, I could not be. Kill him I had to, regardless. Too dangerous he had become. Too much power he had amassed. And in doing so, you've plunged the galaxy into uncertainty, Tarkin said. Lord Vader has assumed command, yes. But without Palpatine's vision, without his carefully laid plans, we're facing potential civil war. Republic loyalists who oppose the transition to Empire. Separatist holdouts who see an opportunity to resume their rebellion. Jedi survivors rallying clone units that have broken free of their programming. And in the middle of it all, you sit here, the symbol around which resistance could coalesce. Yoda's ears twitched, the closest thing to a smile the Jedi Master would allow himself. Execute me, then. Simple it would be. Quick. Why keep me alive? It was the question Tarkin had been asking himself since Lord Vader had given the order to secure Yoda rather than kill him. The logical move would be immediate execution followed by a very public trial in absentia, painting the Jedi as traitors who had attempted to overthrow the Republic. Clean, decisive, final. But Vader had been insistent. Yoda was to be held, interrogated, and tried before the Senate as a demonstration that even Jedi answered to the law. Lord Vader believes the galaxy needs to see justice done properly, Tarkin said. A trial, evidence, a demonstration that we are a government of laws, not tyrants dispensing arbitrary punishment. Vader, Yoda said, and Tarkin heard genuine sorrow in that single word. Anakin Skywalker, once he was, bright in the Force, compassionate, despite his flaws, and now twisted, broken, a creature of rage and pain. Save Padme, did he think this would prevent her death? Tarkin's expression flickered, the first crack in his composure. How do you know about Senator Amidala? The Force reveals many things, Yoda said. Anakin's attachment to her, hidden it was not from those who knew where to look. Foreseen her death in childbirth, he did. Feared losing her, as he lost his mother. And Sidious preyed upon that fear. Promised power to prevent death itself. But a lie it was. Always the Sith lie. Senator Amidala remains in her apartment under protective custody. Tarkin said carefully. She's unaware of the extent of Skywalker's transformation. Lord Vader has forbidden anyone from informing her until he can speak with her personally. Speak with her, Yoda repeated. Tell me, Tarkin, in your experience with Lord Vader these past hours, seem capable of gentle conversation, does he? Tarkin had to admit the Jedi had a point. In the 12 hours since Palpatine's death, Darth Vader had been a force of barely contained fury. He'd executed 3 Imperial officers for failure to secure Jedi prisoners quickly enough. He'd force-choked a clone commander who questioned the continuation of Order 66, and the rage that radiated from him was palpable, even to those without Force sensitivity. Lord Vader is adjusting to his new role, Tarkin said diplomatically. And when Padme learns what he has done, Yoda pressed. When discovers she does that slaughtered children, he did. That betrayed everything he believed. For power that cannot save her? What then, Tarkin? Think you that she will welcome him with open arms? Before Tarkin could respond, footsteps echoed in the corridor. Outside, heavy, mechanical, accompanied by the distinctive sound of a respirator that Vader had required since his transformation. Something about the dark side, burning through his body faster than it could heal. According to the medical droids, Darth Vader emerged from the shadows, his black robes billowing, his new armor gleaming. The mask he wore was a stark contrast to Anakin Skywalker's handsome features, an angular helm of black durasteel that hid whatever remained of the young Jedi Knight's face. Grand Moff Tarkin, Vader's voice emerged from his mask, deep and modulated by machinery. Leave us. It wasn't a request. Tarkin recognized a dismissal when he heard one, regardless of how it was phrased. He nodded crisply and withdrew, though not before catching Yoda's gaze one final time. The Jedi Master's expression held a warning. Be careful what monsters you serve. The cell fell silent except for the hum of the ray shield and Vader's mechanical breathing. The Sith Lord stood motionless, his yellow eyes, visible through the mask's lenses, fixed on the small green Jedi who had killed his master. You should be dead, Vader said finally. I should have killed you in the Senate chamber. Yet did not, Yoda observed. Why? Because you're more valuable alive, Vader replied. The Jedi who remained loyal to the Republic need to see their Grand Master stand trial. They need to understand that the order they served was corrupt, that the Republic they defended was a lie, that everything they believed was built on sand. Comfort yourself with these justifications, do you? Yoda asked gently. Believe them, do you? Or simply words they are, to cover the truth? What truth? That kill me you cannot, Yoda said. Because would make real your fall. It would. Irrevocable. Final. While live I do. Remain Anakin Skywalker somewhere inside. Once murder me you do, gone he will be. Only Vader will remain. The breathing intensified, the only external sign of the rage building within the Sith. Lord, Anakin Skywalker is dead. I destroyed him, just as I destroyed the Jedi Temple. Just as I will destroy every last Jedi in the galaxy. Dead is he. Yoda tilted his head. Then why hesitate? Why keep me alive, if nothing of Anakin remains? Strike me down. Finish what begun you have. Vader's hand moved to his lightsaber, the weapon hanging at his belt humming with dark-side energy. The blade ignited, crimson light filling the cell, casting shadows that seemed to writhe with malevolent purpose. He held it there, the tip inches from the ray shield, one step away from deactivating the barrier and ending the Jedi Master's life. Do it, Yoda said softly. Strike down an unarmed prisoner. Prove that gone Anakin truly is. That capable of mercy, you no longer are. The lightsaber trembled. Behind the mask, Vader's breathing became ragged, no longer following the mechanical rhythm. The force around them swirled with conflicting emotions, rage and grief, hatred and desperate, terrible hope. You killed him, Vader whispered, and for just a moment, Tarkin, listening from his monitoring, stationed down the corridor, heard Anakin Skywalker in that voice. You killed Master Sidious. He was going to teach me. He was going to show me how to save her. And you killed him. Save her from what, Anakin? Yoda asked, using the name deliberately. From a vision? A dream? Chase one vision, did you, and create another. Foreseen Padme's death, you did. But caused it, will you now? Think you she will forgive what done you have? She'll understand, Vader said, but the certainty had leaked from his voice. When I explain. Explain what? Yoda interrupted. That murdered children, you did, to gain power to save her? That betrayed your brothers, slaughtered your friends, destroyed everything you swore to protect? That chose fear over faith, selfishness over selflessness? Understand this, will she? The lightsaber deactivated. Vader stood there, his mechanical breathing the only sound in the cell. His fists clenched so tight his knuckles would have been white if they were visible beneath his gloves. You know nothing about love, Vader said finally. You Jedi, with your rules and restrictions, your prohibitions against attachment. You would have forced me to watch her die, to accept it as the will of the Force, to let go, and instead, lose everything you will, Yoda said sadly. Already begun, has it? Feel through the Force, can you not? Padme's confusion, her fear, her grief. Knows something is wrong, she does. And when the truth, she learns. Enough! Vader's roar echoed through the sublevels. He turned sharply and stalked toward the exit, his cape snapping behind him. At the threshold, he paused. You'll stand trial in 3 days. The Senate will convene, evidence will be presented, and you will be judged for murdering the Supreme Chancellor. And after you're convicted, after you're executed as a traitor to the Republic, I will personally inform every Jedi survivor that their Grand Master died a criminal. Convict me, they may, Yoda said. Execute me, they might. But change the truth, they cannot. Stop the Sith Lord, I did. Ended his plans, I did. And freed the clones from his slavery, I did. History will judge which of us was the traitor, Anakin Skywalker. Vader left without responding, but his Force presence remained behind, a dark, anguished storm that even the Ray shield couldn't completely contain. Yoda settled back into meditation, his eyes closing, his breathing steadying. Through the Force, he felt the galaxy's turmoil. Jedi survivors scattered across thousands of worlds, hunted and afraid. Clone troopers wrestling with fractured minds and impossible guilt. And at the center of it all, a darkness that had once been the chosen one, now twisted into something that served neither light nor dark, but only its own desperate, doomed hope of preventing the future it had already created. Outside his cell, Grand Moff Tarkin reviewed the recording of Vader's confrontation with Yoda and made several mental notes. The first, Lord Vader was unstable, driven by emotion rather than strategy. The second, Senator Amidala represented a potential lever for controlling or manipulating the new Sith Lord. The third, Yoda's trial would be the most important political theater in galactic history, and it needed to be managed with extreme precision. And the fourth, somewhere in the galaxy, Jedi survivors were undoubtedly planning to rescue their Grand Master. Tarkin would be ready for them. The Kaminoan cloning facility on Tapoka City had always been a place of sterile perfection. Endless rain hammered against pristine white structures that rose from a gray ocean like monuments to genetic mastery. For a decade, this facility had been the birthplace of the Grand Army of the Republic, millions of clone troopers grown from the DNA of Jango Fett, trained from birth to be the perfect soldiers. Now it was a laboratory for understanding what happened when perfect soldiers broke. Master Shaak Ti moved through the medical wing with practiced grace, her presence in the Force carefully muted to avoid detection by the Imperial garrison that had arrived 6 hours earlier. The Togruta Jedi had spent the entire war on Kamino, overseeing clone training and serving as the Jedi Order's liaison to the Kaminoan cloners. She knew every corridor, every security protocol, every weakness in the facility's defenses. She also knew where they kept the failed clones. CT 6116, Kix, to the men of the 501st Legion, sat restrained in a medical chair, his armor removed, diagnostic equipment attached to dozens of points on his shaved head. The clone medic's eyes were open but unfocused, his breathing shallow. Drool leaked from the corner of his mouth. Every few seconds, his body spasmed as though receiving an electric shock. Beside him, Kaminoan Chief Medical Scientist Nala Se examined readouts on a datapad, her long neck tilting as she processed information. She didn't look up as Shaak Ti entered. Master Jedi, Nala Se said in her precise, clinical tone. I was informed you had been terminated during Order 66. Yet here you stand. Curious. The reports of my death were premature, Shaak Ti replied calmly. What happened to CT 6116? A fascinating case study in behavioral modification failure. Nala Se gestured to the clone with one elongated finger. CT 6116 was among the units who executed Order 66 successfully. He killed his Jedi commander, a Padawan named Tef. I believe, with a single shot to the head at close range. Textbook execution. Shaak Ti's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. However, Nala Se continued. Approximately 4 hours after Supreme Chancellor Palpatine's termination, CT 6116 began exhibiting signs of acute psychological distress. He became disoriented, aggressive toward fellow clones, and eventually suffered a complete mental breakdown. He has been catatonic for the past 6 hours, aside from these periodic spasms. What's causing the spasms? His inhibitor chip is attempting to reassert control over neural pathways that are actively rejecting its influence. Nalase explained. Imagine two conflicting programs running simultaneously in the same system, each trying to overwrite the other. The result is this. Kix spasmed again, harder this time. His mouth worked soundlessly, as though trying to speak. Shakti stepped closer and placed her hand gently on the clone's shoulder. Opening herself to the force, she immediately recoiled. The clone's mind was a battlefield. One part of him, the inhibitor chips, programming, insisted, with mechanical certainty, that Jedi were traitors, who had to be eliminated. The other part, Kix's actual personality and memories, screamed in horror at what he'd done, at the murder of a young Padawan he'd served beside for months. The two parts were locked in combat, neither able to gain complete dominance, tearing the clone's consciousness apart in the process. How many clones are experiencing this? Shakti asked quietly. Difficult to quantify precisely, Nalase admitted. Based on preliminary reports from across the galaxy, approximately 20 to 25% of clone units. The percentage appears higher among clones who had developed stronger personal relationships with their Jedi commanders. Emotional attachment, it seems, provides some resistance to the chip's programming. Can it be reversed? Unknown. We are in unexplored territory. Master Jedi. The inhibitor chips were designed with Sith influence as a reinforcing factor. Without that influence, Nalase's large eyes blinked slowly. The chips function, but they lack the supernatural reinforcement that made Order 66 absolute. Some clones' natural personalities are strong enough to fight back. Most are not. Shakti looked at Kix, at the broken soldier whose mind was destroying itself, and felt rage build in her chest. Not the hot, explosive anger that led to the dark side, but the cold, righteous fury that came from witnessing profound injustice. You knew, she said, her voice low and dangerous. The Kaminoans knew about the chips, about their true purpose. We designed them, Nalase confirmed without shame. Under contract from Tyrannus, Count Dooku, as you knew him. The chips were presented to the Jedi Council as behavioral modification units to prevent clone aggression and ensure loyalty. This was not entirely untrue. They do ensure loyalty, simply not to the Jedi. And you said nothing. For 10 years, you said nothing. We are geneticists and cloners, Master Jedi, not ethicists. We fulfill contracts. Tyrannus paid generously for this particular modification. The moral implications of our work are not our concern. Shakti's hand moved to her lightsaber, but she stopped herself. Killing Nalase would accomplish nothing except satisfying her anger. And anger served the dark side, not justice. Can the chips be removed? She asked instead. Surgically? Yes. It's a delicate procedure. The chip is integrated with the clone's brain at a fundamental level. Removal carries a 30% chance of death or permanent brain damage. But it can be done. Then you're going to do it. Nalase's head tilted further, an expression of mild curiosity on her alien features. Am I? And why would I do this? Lord Vader has confirmed that Order 66 remains in effect. The Empire requires functional clone troopers, not brain-damaged vegetables. Removing the chips would be counter to Imperial interests. Because, Shakti said quietly, activating her lightsaber, the blue blade casting sharp shadows across the medical bay. I am asking you. And because if you refuse, I will destroy every cloning facility on this planet before I leave. 10 years of work. Billions of credits in genetic research. All of it gone. The two beings, Jedi and Kaminoan, stared at each other across the medical bay. Outside, rain hammered against the transparent steel windows. Kix spasmed again, his mouth forming words no one could hear. Finally, Nalase nodded. An effective threat. Very well. But understand, Master Jedi, I can remove the chip from this clone. Perhaps a few dozen others before the Imperial garrison realizes what I'm doing. I cannot save them all. There are 3 million clone troopers in the Grand Army. Even if I worked without rest for a year, I couldn't remove all the chips. Then we start with the ones we can save, Shakti said. And we give them a choice about what comes next. For hours later, in a rarely used observation chamber overlooking Tapoka City's cloning vats, 5 clone troopers stood at attention. Each bore the scars of battle, physical and psychological. Each had undergone emergency surgery to remove their inhibitor chips, and each now faced a choice that would define the rest of their lives. Shakti studied them carefully. CT 6116 kicks from the 501st Legion. His eyes clearer now, but haunted by what he'd done under the chip's influence. CT 5385 Tup, who had experienced chip malfunction months earlier, and whose attempted warning had been suppressed by Kaminoan officials. CC 5576 Gregor, a commando who had lost his memory during the war and whose chip had never fully activated. CT 1409 Echo, the ARC trooper who had been rescued from separatist capture and whose cybernetic modifications had partially degraded his chip's effectiveness. And CC 2224 Cody, commander of the 212th Attack Battalion, who had shot Obi-Wan Kenobi off a cliff on Utapau and who now stood with his fists clenched so tight his knuckles showed white through his gloves. You're free, Shakti told them. The chips that forced you to attack the Jedi are gone. You can think clearly now. Make your own choices. Free, Cody repeated, his voice hollow. We murdered our generals, ma'am. Shot them in the back. Hunted them down like animals. And you're telling us we're free? You were slaves, Shakti said firmly. The chips made you slaves. What you did under their influence was not your fault. Felt like my fault, Cody said bitterly. I pulled the trigger. I gave the order. I watched General Kenobi fall and felt nothing. Just satisfaction that the mission was complete. And now I remember it all. Remember him turning to me, confused, asking if there was a problem. And I ordered my men to fire. The chip, Shakti began. I know about the damn chip, Cody shouted, decades of military discipline cracking under the weight of guilt. I know it wasn't really me, but it was my hands, my voice, my face that General Kenobi saw when his own men betrayed him. How do I live with that? The question hung in the air. The other clones shifted uncomfortably, each wrestling with their own versions of the same guilt. By fighting back, said a new voice. They all turned. Master Quinlan Voss emerged from the shadows at the back of the observation chamber, his dark robes dripping from the rain outside. Behind him came Master Ayla Secura, her blue skin bearing fresh scars, her leku wrapped protectively against the Kaminoan cold. Master Voss, Shakti said, surprised. Master Secura, I wasn't expecting. We intercepted your message to Obi-Wan, Quinlan explained. Figured you could use backup, and maybe some perspective for these men. He turned to the clones, his scarred face serious. You want to know how you live with what you did? You help us fix it. Fix it? Echo asked. Sir, with respect, we killed Jedi. We helped destroy the Order. How do you fix that? You don't, Ayla said softly, stepping forward. What's done is done. The Jedi who died are gone. But there are survivors. Jedi being hunted across the galaxy by clones who are still under chip control. And in 3 days, Master Yoda, the Jedi who killed Darth Sidious, who ended the Sith Lord's plan, is going to be put on trial on Coruscant. Understanding dawned on Cody's face. You're planning a rescue. We're planning to save our Grand Master, Quinlan corrected. And we need soldiers. Real soldiers, not the slaves Sidious created. Men who can think for themselves, who can fight for something besides blind obedience. You're asking us to betray the Empire, Tup said slowly. To turn on our brothers. To become traitors. We're asking you to choose, Shakti said. The Empire isn't the Republic you swore to serve. Darth Vader isn't the Jedi Knight you fought beside. And Order 66 isn't a lawful command. It's a Sith Lord's dying curse. You have your minds back. Your free will. What you do with them is up to you. The 5 clones looked at each other. Years of shared experience passed between them in that moment. Battles fought together. Brothers lost. The camaraderie that came from being identical and yet individual. They were products of Kaminoan genetic engineering, yes. But they were also men. And men could choose. General Kenobi is alive, Cody said quietly. I checked the casualty reports. No body recovered on Utapau, which means he survived the fall. He did, Ayla confirmed. He's in hiding, but he's helping coordinate the rescue. A smile, bitter but genuine, crossed Cody's face. Then I guess I owe him an apology, and maybe a chance to shoot something that actually deserves it. He came to attention, snapping off a crisp salute. Commander Cody reporting for duty, ma'am. With all due respect to the Empire, they can rot in hell. One by one, the other clones followed suit. Kix, still shaky from his chip removal, but standing straight. Echo, his cybernetic arm whirring as he saluted. Tup, tears streaming down his face, but his voice steady. Gregor, grinning like he'd just been given permission to blow something up. Good men, Quinlan said approvingly. Now here's the situation. Yoda is being held on Coruscant in the Imperial Palace sublevels. Security is massive, clone garrison. Imperial guards, probably Inquisitors by now. And Vader himself. We can't fight our way in. We need intelligence, inside access, and perfect timing. I can get you the access codes, Nalase said from the doorway. Every head turned to stare at the Kaminoan scientist. She held up a datapad. I still have administrative clearance in Republic. Excuse me, Imperial systems. The security protocols haven't been fully updated yet. Sloppy of them, really. Why would you help us? Shak T asked suspiciously. Because, Nalase said calmly, the Empire has just informed me that my cloning facilities are being decommissioned. Apparently, Lord Vader prefers recruiting natural-born soldiers over clones. Something about loyalty being more reliable when it's chosen rather than programmed. Her large eyes blinked slowly. I find this decision economically and strategically unsound, and I dislike unsound decisions. Quinlan laughed, a sharp, surprised sound. So you're helping us out of spite. I'm helping you because the data is valuable, Nalase corrected. You wish to know how to mass remove inhibitor chips from clone troopers. I can provide that information. In exchange, you ensure that my research facilities remain operational under whatever government emerges from this chaos. A fair trade, I believe. You're all heart, Cody muttered, but he was smiling. Ayla stepped to the observation chambers. Main terminal and activated a holographic display of Coruscant. The planet rotated slowly, its surface a glittering web of city lights. We have 3 days before Yoda's trial. 3 days to plan, infiltrate, and extract the Grand Master from the most heavily fortified location in the galaxy. Master Kenobi is gathering additional support. Other Jedi survivors. Clone units that have broken free of chip control. Maybe even some senators who oppose the Empire. And if we fail? Kix asked. Then the Jedi Order dies with Master Yoda. Shak T said simply. And the Empire becomes permanent. No opposition. No hope. Just tyranny stretching across the galaxy for generations. No pressure then, Echo said dryly. Despite everything, despite the guilt, the fear, the overwhelming odds, the clones found themselves grinning. This was what they'd been bred for. Not murdering Jedi, not serving Sith Lords, but standing against impossible odds to protect something that mattered. All right, Cody said, his voice carrying the authority of a man who'd commanded thousands in battle. Let's get to work. We've got a Jedi to rescue and an Empire to kick in the teeth. Who's with me? The response came in unison from Jedi and clone alike. Sir? Yes, sir. Outside, Kamino's eternal rain continued to fall. But inside the observation chamber, something new was being born. Not an army, not a rebellion. Just a small group of beings who refused to accept that the darkness had won. And sometimes, that's all it takes to change the galaxy. Coruscant Senate District at night was a study in contrasts. The upper levels glittered with wealth and power, restaurants serving exotic delicacies, theaters showcasing the galaxy's finest performers, penthouses where senators and corporate executives made deals that affected trillions. But descend far enough through the vertical city, and the glamour gave way to something darker. The lower levels, where sunlight never reached, where the air tasted of recycled desperation, were home to those the Republic had forgotten and the Empire would actively suppress. Obi-Wan Kenobi moved through these lower levels like a ghost, his Jedi robes replaced by the nondescript coveralls of a maintenance worker. His beard had been trimmed, his hair darkened with temporary dye. To any casual observer, he was just another faceless laborer returning home after a long shift. Only those sensitive to the Force might have noticed the way shadows seemed to part around him. the subtle influence that made people look away when he passed. He was looking for someone specific, someone whose cantina had once been a meeting place for information brokers, smugglers, and the occasional Jedi who needed to hear rumors from the galactic underworld. Dex's diner hadn't changed much in the years since the war began. The same chromium facade, the same neon sign flickering with one letter burned out. But when Obi-Wan pushed through the door, he found the interior transformed. The cheerful, greasy spoon atmosphere had been replaced by something more subdued. The few customers present sat in isolated booths, speaking in low voices. No one looked up when he entered. Behind the counter, Dexter Jetster, the four-armed basilisk who owned the establishment, was wiping down the cooking surface with methodical precision. His large eyes flicked toward Obi-Wan, then away. But not before Obi-Wan caught the flash of recognition. Obi-Wan slid onto a stool at the counter. "Coffee," he said quietly. "Black." Dex poured without comment, his forearms moving with practiced efficiency. He set the cup down, then leaned closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "Heard you were dead. Clone Wars casualty. Shot down over some outer-rim dust ball." "Greatly exaggerated," Obi-Wan replied, sipping the coffee. "It was terrible as always. Comforting in its consistency. Dangerous, coming here," Dex continued, wiping the counter even though it was already clean. "Empire's got eyes everywhere now, looking for Jedi survivors, offering bounties that'd make even Hutts jealous. I know. That's why I need your help." Dex's eyes narrowed. "My help? Obi-Wan, I run a diner. What could I possibly?" "You run an information network," Obi-Wan interrupted gently. "You always have. During the Republic, you were my best source for underworld intelligence. I'm hoping that network survived the transition." The basilisk's forearms paused in their endless motion. He glanced around the diner, confirming that no one was paying attention to their conversation. "Survived? Sure. Thriving? That's another question. Empire's cracking down on anything that even smells like organized crime. Black Sun's been hammered. Pikes are keeping their heads down. Even the Hutts are nervous. But you still hear things." "I hear things," Dex admitted. "Like I hear you Jedi are planning something stupid. Something involving Master Yoda and the Imperial Palace. Something that's going to get a lot of good people killed." Obi-Wan set down his coffee cup. "So you do still have your network?" "What's left of it?" Dex sighed, all four shoulders slumping. "Look, Obi-Wan, I like you. Helped you track down those Kamino saber darts back before the war, didn't I? But this is suicide. You can't break into the Imperial Palace. Security's tighter than a Hutt's purse. Clone troopers everywhere. Red Guards. And Vader himself is based there now. I'm aware of the challenges." "Are you?" Dex leaned even closer, his voice urgent. "Do you know what Vader's been doing since he took command? He's been hunting. Personally. 3 Jedi killed in the last 2 days. Masters. Jocasta Nu, Cian Dralik, and Saraketo. Tracked them down himself. No mercy. No hesitation. This isn't Anakin Skywalker anymore, Obi-Wan. It's something else wearing his face." The words hit Obi-Wan like physical blows. Jocasta Nu had been the Jedi Temple's chief librarian, a repository of centuries of knowledge. Cian Dralik had been the Temple's battle master, one of the finest lightsaber instructors in the Order. And Saraketo had been a promising young knight, barely 25 years old. "I know what he's become," Obi-Wan said quietly. "I've seen the recordings from the Temple. I know what he did to the younglings." "Then you know there's no reasoning with him. No reaching whatever piece of Anakin might still be buried under all that darkness." "Perhaps." Obi-Wan's hand clenched around his coffee cup. "But Yoda isn't just another Jedi, Dex. He's the Grand Master. He killed Darth Sidious. He ended the Sith Lord's plan. If we abandon him, we're saying that sacrifice doesn't matter. That the Empire wins simply because it's too dangerous to fight back." Dex was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached under the counter and pulled out a datapad, sliding it across to Obi-Wan. "Imperial Palace security protocols. Updated as of 6 hours ago. Guard rotations, access codes, structural weaknesses. Everything my network could dig up." Obi-Wan stared at the datapad. "Dex, don't thank me yet," the basilisk growled. "Because I'm also going to tell you that according to my sources, the trial isn't really about justice. It's bait. Tarkin and Vader both know you Jedi will try to rescue Yoda. They're counting on it. The whole thing's a trap designed to draw out survivors and eliminate them all at once." We suspected as much. And you're going anyway. Yes. Dex shook his massive head, all four arms moving in a gesture of exasperation. Jedi, always with the martyrdom. You know what your problem is? You think the galaxy needs heroes. What it really needs is survivors. People who live long enough to fight another day. Master Yoda survived, Obi-Wan pointed out. He fought Sidious and won. If that's not surviving to fight another day, I don't know what is. Fair point. Dex picked up the coffee pot and refilled Obi-Wan's cup without asking. So what's your plan? And please tell me it's more sophisticated. Then walk in the front door and start swinging. Lightsabers. Slightly more sophisticated, Obi-Wan said with the ghost of a smile. We have inside access codes from Kamino. Clone troopers who've had their inhibitor chips removed and are willing to help. And potentially, some Senate allies who oppose the Empire. Senate allies? Dex's eyebrows rose. You mean there are actually senators with spines left? A few. Senator Organa of Alderaan, for one. Mon Mothma of Chandrila. They've been quietly building opposition to the emergency powers Palpatine accumulated during the war. With his death, they see an opportunity to restore the Republic. Or they see an opportunity to get themselves killed, Dex muttered. Vader's not going to tolerate opposition, political or otherwise. He'll crush anyone who stands in his way. Which is why we need to move quickly, Obi-Wan said. The trial is in 2 days. We need to infiltrate the palace before then, locate Yoda's exact position, and extract him during the chaos of the trial itself. During the chaos, Dex repeated flatly. You're going to create chaos. In the Imperial Palace, while it's filled with the galaxy's most powerful military and political figures. Yes. And you think you'll just walk out afterwards. I'm hoping, not thinking. Despite himself, Dex laughed, a deep, rumbling sound that momentarily restored some of the diner's old warmth. You Jedi are crazy. Always have been. All right, I'm in. Obi-Wan blinked. You're what? In. Helping. Probably. Getting myself killed in the process. Dex spread his forearms wide. Look around, Obi-Wan. This diner was my life. During the Republic, I had customers from every level of society. Senators sitting next to smugglers. Clone troopers trading war stories with spacers. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. Now, half my regulars are dead or in hiding. The other half are too scared to be seen in a place like this. The Empire doesn't want information networks or neutral meeting grounds. It wants control. Total, absolute control. And if you Jedi don't stop it now, there won't be anyone left to stop it later. Dex, I can't ask you to. You're not asking. I'm volunteering. Dex tapped the datapad. Besides, I've got something you need. Something even your fancy Jedi tricks can't provide. What's that? Access to the service tunnels under the Senate District. The old Republic maintenance corridors that were built when Coruscant first became the capital thousands of years ago. Most of them have been sealed off or forgotten. But I know them. Used to use them for, let's call them unofficial deliveries during the Republic years. They connect to damn near every major building in the district, including the Imperial Palace. Obi-Wan leaned forward, interest sparking in his eyes. They're not on the official schematics. Not the ones the Empire uses. Too old. Pre-Rusan Reformation, some of them. The bureaucrats forgot they existed centuries ago. But smugglers and information brokers? We remember. Can you guide us through? Better. I can get you in and out, without ever setting foot in an area monitored by Imperial security, assuming you survive whatever you're planning to do once you're inside. Obi-Wan stood, placing a handful of credits on the counter, far more than a cup of terrible coffee warranted. Thank you, old friend, for this and for everything. Save your thanks for when we're all still alive. Dex grumbled, but his four hands clasped. Obi-Wan's in a gesture of solidarity that transcended species and circumstance. The diner's door chimed as it opened. Both beings froze. A squad of stormtroopers, the new Imperial designation for clone troopers, though these bore the standardized armor of recruits rather than the personalized gear of Clone Wars. Veterans filed in. Their leader, marked by a colored pauldron, surveyed the establishment with cold efficiency. Establishment inspection, the lead trooper announced. All patrons remain seated. We're checking identification and conducting a routine sweep for contraband. Obi-Wan remained perfectly still. his presence in the Force suppressed to near invisibility. The datapad Dex had given him sat on the counter between them, its screen dark but its contents damning. Dex moved with casual ease, his forearms beginning to prepare food as though the stormtroopers were just another group of customers. "Welcome, gentlemen. Can I get you some CAF?" "On the house, of course." The lead trooper ignored him, approaching the counter, his helmet turned toward Obi-Wan, the blank white plastoid face revealing nothing. Identification. Obi-Wan reached slowly for the forged ID card he'd obtained from Quinlan's contacts in the underworld. As he did, he extended the slightest touch through the Force, not a command, not a manipulation, just a gentle suggestion that he was boring, unmemorable. Exactly what his maintenance worker disguise suggested. The trooper examined the ID, then handed it back. "Move along." Obi-Wan nodded, slipped off the stool, and headed for the door. Behind him, he heard Dex engaging the stormtroopers in conversation about health codes and Imperial regulations, his voice carrying just the right mix of annoyance and cooperation. Outside, in the perpetual twilight of Coruscant's lower levels, Obi-Wan allowed himself a moment to breathe. That had been close. Too close. The Empire's security was tightening faster than anticipated. If they were conducting random inspections even in places like Dex's diner, finding safe meeting spots would become increasingly difficult. His comlink chirped, the encrypted channel the surviving Jedi were using for coordination. Obi-Wan activated it, keeping his voice low. "Kenobi here. Master Kenobi." It was Senator Bail Organa's voice, tight with urgency. "We have a problem. The Senate is being recalled for an emergency session tomorrow, a full day earlier than Yoda's scheduled trial. Vader's pushing to formalize the Empire immediately. If he succeeds, any pretense of Republic law goes out the airlock. What about the senators who oppose the transition, being marginalized or intimidated into silence?" Mon Mothma tried to speak against the emergency measures and was shouted down. Some of the more outspoken opposition have already been arrested on trumped-up charges. Vader's moving faster than we anticipated. Obi-Wan's mind raced. An earlier timeline meant less time to prepare, fewer resources to gather, more opportunities for mistakes. But it also meant Vader was feeling pressure. Rushing suggested weakness, not strength. "How long do we have?" 36 hours until the Senate session. Maybe 48 until Yoda's trial, if we're lucky. "Master Kenobi, if you're going to act, it needs to be soon." "Understood. Rally our allies. We move in 2 days, during the trial. Tell them to be ready." He closed the channel and stood in the shadows of the lower levels, watching speeders flash past overhead, their lights briefly illuminating the darkness before plunging it back into gloom. Somewhere above, in the glittering towers of power, Darth Vader was consolidating control. And somewhere below, in the forgotten tunnels of an ancient city, a small group of Jedi and their allies were preparing to challenge that control. The odds were impossible. The risks were suicidal. Success would require perfect coordination, extraordinary luck, and the kind of heroism that usually only existed in holodramas. But as Qui-Gon Jinn had once taught him, in the face of impossible odds, a Jedi doesn't calculate probabilities. A Jedi trusts in the Force. Obi-Wan adjusted his workers' coveralls and descended deeper into Coruscant's bowels, toward the ancient tunnels where his team was gathering. They had 36 hours to plan the impossible. It would have to be enough. The Imperial Senate chamber, the same arena where Yoda had killed Darth Sidious just 3 days earlier, had been hastily repaired for the emergency session. New Senate pods hung from restored moorings. Those scorch marks still scarred the walls where Force lightning had carved permanent testimony to the battle. The air still carried a faint smell of ozone and melted plasteel. 2,000 senators from across the galaxy filled the chamber, their voices rising in a cacophony of debate, fear, and uncertainty. Some wore the elaborate robes of core world aristocracy. Others bore the practical garments of outer rim representatives. All of them understood that what happened in this session would define the galaxy for generations. On the Supreme Chancellor's podium, now renamed the Imperial throne platform, stood Darth Vader. The Sith Lord cut an imposing figure in his black armor and flowing cape, his mechanical breathing audible even over the chamber's acoustics. Behind him, arranged in a semicircle of crimson menace, stood the Emperor's Red Guard. They had served Palpatine without question. Now they served Vader with equal dedication. Their loyalties transferred seamlessly to the new dark side master. Order. Vader's voice boomed through the chamber, amplified by the sound system, and by the dark side, energy that rolled off him in waves. The Senate will come to order. The noise diminished, though undercurrents of murmured conversation continued. Vader waited, his yellow eyes visible through his mask's lenses, his patience clearly finite. "We are here," he began, his words clipped and emotionless, "to address the crisis created by the Jedi betrayal and to formalize the governmental structure necessary to maintain order throughout the galaxy. The Republic is dead. It died the moment the Jedi attempted to overthrow the lawfully elected Supreme Chancellor. What rises from its ashes must be stronger, more decisive, capable of protecting its citizens from those who would destroy it." Senator Bail Organa of Alderaan rose in his pod, his voice carrying the measured authority of a man who had served in the Senate for decades. "Lord Vader, with respect, the Republic is not dead. It is wounded, yes, shaken by the revelation that Supreme Chancellor Palpatine was secretly a Sith Lord. But the solution to tyranny is not more tyranny. It is a return to democratic principles and the rule of law." Scattered applause greeted this statement, primarily from senators representing worlds that had maintained their independence throughout the Clone Wars. But it was quickly drowned out by opposing voices. From the Imperial faction, senators from corporate sector worlds, military representatives, and those who had profited from Palpatine's wartime emergency powers. "The rule of law," Vader repeated, and even through the mechanical modulation, sarcasm dripped from the words. "The same law that allowed the Jedi to accumulate military power unchecked, the same law that permitted a war to devastate the galaxy for 3 years." While the Senate debated procedure, Senator Organa, the Republic failed because it was weak, indecisive, paralyzed by its own bureaucracy. And the alternative? Senator Mon Mothma of Chandrila stood in her pod, her voice calm but unwavering. "A military dictatorship? Rule by fear rather than consent. That is not government, Lord Vader. That is oppression." "It is order," Vader countered. "And order is what the galaxy requires. The Clone Wars proved that democracy alone cannot protect civilization. Strong leadership is necessary. Leadership unencumbered by endless debate and political maneuvering." "Strong leadership," Mon Mothma said quietly, "is another word for tyranny when it lacks accountability. Who will check your power, Lord Vader? Who will ensure you serve the people rather than yourself?" The chamber fell silent. It was the question everyone was thinking, but few dared voice. Vader had assumed command in the wake of Palpatine's death, but by what authority? He was neither elected nor appointed through legal means. He was simply the one with the most power and the willingness to use it. Vader's mechanical breathing filled the silence. For a moment, Bail Organa thought the Sith Lord might simply kill Mon Mothma where she stood, using the Force to crush her throat as he'd reportedly done to several officers who questioned his orders. Instead, Vader said, "I will be checked by the same Force that checked Palpatine, by those senators who have the courage to speak truth to power, by the military officers who serve with honor rather than blind obedience, and by the knowledge that if I fail in my duty to protect the galaxy, I will suffer the same fate as my predecessor." It was a surprisingly politic answer, and it caught many senators off guard. Vader was presenting himself not as a conqueror, but as a reluctant leader stepping into a void. It was a lie, of course. Anyone with Force sensitivity could feel the ambition and darkness radiating from him, but it was an effective lie. Nonetheless, Bail Organa pressed, "The question of legitimacy remains. You were not elected, Lord Vader. You were not appointed by any legal process. You simply took power. How is that different from a coup?" "It is different," came a new voice, "because I am endorsing his leadership." Every head in the chamber turned. From a private entrance reserved for high-ranking officials, Grand Moff Wilhuff Tarkin emerged, flanked by a dozen high-ranking military officers. His gray uniform was immaculate, his posture perfect, his expression carved from ice. Tarkin's pod detached from its mooring and glided into the chamber's center, positioning itself at the same level as Vader's platform. The Grand Moff stood at attention, his hands clasped behind his back, I speak, Tarkin announced, on behalf of the Imperial military, the admirals, generals, and commanders who maintained order during the Clone Wars and who continue to serve the galaxy's interests. We have reviewed the evidence of the Jedi conspiracy. We have assessed the strategic situation, and we have concluded that Lord Vader's assumption of leadership represents the best path forward for galactic stability. The military endorses him, Mon Mothma said slowly. How convenient. And what of civilian authority? What of the principles upon which the Republic was founded? Principles, Tarkin said coldly, do not defeat separatist armies. Principles do not prevent Jedi from attempting coups. Principles are admirable in times of peace, Senator. But we are not in times of peace. We are in the aftermath of the greatest war in galactic history, facing a fractured society and enemies who would exploit our weakness. What we need is not more debate. What we need is decisive action. Bail Organa felt his heart sinking. This was coordinated. Vader and Tarkin had planned this presentation carefully, timing their speeches to create maximum impact. The military endorsement would sway fence-sitting senators, those who valued stability over democracy. I call for a vote, Vader announced. A simple measure does this. Senate grant emergency powers to consolidate governmental authority in the name of galactic security. Those in favor will be voting for the creation of the Galactic Empire, with myself as Emperor until such time as democratic elections can be safely restored. Until such time, Mon Mothma repeated quietly, and Bail heard the defeat in her voice. They both knew what that phrase meant. The emergency powers would never be relinquished. The elections would never come. This vote would transform the Republic into an empire, and there would be no going back. All in favor, Vader said, signal now. For a moment, the chamber was still. Then, one by one, Senate pods lit up with affirmative signals. The corporate sector worlds went first. They had profited immensely from the war and saw continued profit in an empire. The military-aligned worlds followed. Then the fence-sitters, those who feared chaos more than tyranny. Bail watched the count climbing. 1,500, 1,600, 1,700. The two-thirds majority required for constitutional changes was approaching rapidly. He looked at Mon Mothma, saw the same resignation in her eyes. They could vote against this measure. They could make speeches about democracy and freedom. But the mathematics were inexorable. The Senate would vote itself out of existence, just as it had granted Palpatine emergency powers at the Clone Wars beginning. The final count appeared on the central display. 1,847 in favor, 153 against. The Galactic Republic was dead. The Galactic Empire was born. And in that moment, Bail Organa made a decision. If democracy could not survive in the open, it would have to survive in secret. If the Republic could not be saved through legal means, it would have to be rebuilt through rebellion. He caught Mon Mothma's eye across the chamber and saw that she had reached the same conclusion. Vader's mechanical breathing filled the chamber as the affirmative votes were tallied. When the count was complete, he stepped forward on his platform, his cape billowing behind him. The vote is decided, Vader announced. The Galactic Empire is now the legitimate governing body of civilized space. I accept the responsibility of Emperor with full understanding of its burden. The military will maintain order. The Senate will provide counsel and represent the interests of member worlds. And those who oppose this new order, he paused, letting the threat hang in the air, will be reminded that the Empire rewards loyalty and punishes treason. Scattered applause began, tentative at first, then growing as senators realized that visible enthusiasm might protect them from future scrutiny. Within minutes, the chamber rang with manufactured celebration. But beneath that noise, in the private channels between allied senators, a different conversation was beginning. Bail Organa opened an encrypted comm to Mon Mothma, his message brief. Tonight, my quarters. We need to talk about the future. Her response was equally terse. Agreed. Bring Mothma and anyone else you trust absolutely. The emergency session continued for another 3 hours, formalizing the transition from Republic to Empire, appointing regional governors, and establishing new military protocols. Bail participated when necessary, his face a mask of diplomatic neutrality, while his mind raced through possibilities and plans. Finally, Vader concluded the session. Tomorrow, we will hold a public trial for the Jedi traitor Yoda. The charges are assassination of the Supreme Chancellor, and conspiracy to overthrow the Republic. The galaxy will see that even the mighty are subject to imperial justice. This session is adjourned. The Senate pods began returning to their moorings. Senators filed out in small groups, some celebrating, some shell-shocked. Some, like Bale, already planning for the resistance to come. As Bale's pod approached its docking station, his personal comlink buzzed with an incoming transmission on a channel he hadn't used in years. A Jedi emergency frequency. He activated it discreetly, the holographic image resolving into Obi-Wan Kenobi's bearded face. Senator Organa, Obi-Wan said without preamble. I assume you heard the news. That the Republic just voted itself into dictatorship? Yes, I heard. Bale kept his voice low, aware that surveillance could be anywhere. I assume this changes your timeline. Accelerates it, Obi-Wan confirmed. Yoda's trial is tomorrow. We move then. But Senator, we're going to need help. Inside help. Someone who can create a distraction during the trial. Someone the Empire won't immediately suspect. Bale understood immediately what Obi-Wan was asking. A senator, someone with legitimate access to the trial. Someone who could disrupt proceedings without immediately being arrested. Would be invaluable for the rescue attempt. That's asking me to commit treason, Bale said carefully. Yes, Obi-Wan replied. It is, and I won't pretend otherwise. If you help us, you'll be marked. Your world might face imperial reprisal. Your position in the Senate will be compromised. I can't promise you'll survive. Bale looked out over the Senate chamber, at the scorch marks that still scarred the walls, at the platform where Vader stood, surrounded by red guards and military officers, at the senators filing out, their faces reflecting everything from triumph to despair. I'll do it, he said quietly. Not because I believe the Jedi are perfect, not even because I think rescuing Yoda will change the ultimate outcome, but because someone needs to stand up and say that this is wrong. That trading freedom for security is a bargain with the devil. Thank you, Obi-Wan said, relief evident in his voice. I'll send you the details of what we need. It won't be easy. Nothing worth doing ever is. Bale closed the channel and stepped out of his pod, his mind already racing through the logistics of what he'd just agreed to. Behind him, unnoticed in the shadows of the chamber's upper reaches, a figure watched. Mas Amedda, Palpatine's former vice-chancellor and now Vader's chief administrator, had observed the entire session. His blue skin appeared almost purple in the dim light, his horns casting sharp shadows. He had seen Bale Organa's encrypted communication. He had noted which senators voted against the Empire, and he had already begun compiling lists of potential dissidents for Imperial intelligence to monitor. The Empire was born, but so too was the rebellion that would eventually destroy it. Neither side knew it yet, but the battle lines had just been drawn. And tomorrow, in the chaos of Yoda's trial, those lines would be tested with fire and blood. The ancient maintenance tunnels beneath Coruscant Senate District were a maze of durasteel corridors and forgotten infrastructure. Water dripped from corroded pipes. Emergency lighting strips flickered with dying power. Cells that hadn't been replaced in centuries. The air tasted of rust and recycled atmosphere, thick enough to make breathing unpleasant but not impossible. Obi-Wan Kenobi led a group of 12 beings through these tunnels, following Dexter Jettster's detailed map and the Basilisk's guidance. Behind Obi-Wan came Commander Cody and 4 other clone troopers, Kix, Echo, Tup, and Gregor, all equipped with specialized infiltration gear and sporting, freshly painted armor that bore no unit designations. Following them were Masters Aayla Secura, Quinlan Vos, and Shak Ti, their lightsabers concealed but ready. Dex himself brought up the rear, his 4 arms carrying equipment that would be essential for the extraction. They had been moving through the tunnels for 2 hours, occasionally pausing to let Imperial patrols pass overhead, their footsteps vibrating through the ancient metal. We're directly beneath the Imperial Palace now, Dex whispered, consulting a datapad that displayed his hand-drawn maps overlaid with official schematics. There's an access point about 50 meters ahead that connects to the palace's lower detention levels. Old emergency exit sealed up about 300 years ago. But I've got the tools to cut through. How long? Obi-Wan asked. 10 minutes to cut. Maybe 5 more to ensure we're not triggering any ancient security systems that might still be active. Obi-Wan nodded and signaled the group to halt. They settled into defensive positions, while Dex and Echo, the ARC, troopers cybernetic, enhancements making him ideal for technical work, moved forward to begin, cutting through the sealed bulkhead. Quinlan Vos sidled up beside Obi-Wan, his scarred face grim in the flickering light. You feel it, don't you? The darkness above us. Vader, Obi-Wan confirmed quietly. His presence is overwhelming. I've never felt anything like it. It's as if the dark side has completely consumed him. Because it has, Shaak Ti said, joining their conversation. I've been meditating on what happened. Anakin's fall wasn't gradual, it was catastrophic. He went from Jedi Knight to child murderer in the span of hours. That kind of transformation doesn't leave room for the person he was. There's only the monster he became. You're wrong, Obi-Wan said, though his voice lacked conviction. There's still good in him. I have to believe that. Why? Quinlan asked bluntly. Because he was your Padawan? Because you trained him? Obi-Wan, belief doesn't change reality. Anakin Skywalker murdered younglings. He led the assault on the temple. He's hunting down Jedi survivors one by one. What part of that suggests there's good left? Obi-Wan wanted to argue, but the words wouldn't come. He had watched the temple security recordings, had seen Anakin, his face twisted with rage and yellow, Sith eyes, cutting down children who begged for mercy, had heard the 501st troopers following their new commanders. Orders without hesitation. I trained him, Obi-Wan said finally. If there's darkness in him, some of that is my failure. No, Ayla said firmly. The dark side preys on individual choices, not on training. You taught Anakin everything you could. He chose to ignore those teachings. That's on him, not you. Before Obi-Wan could respond, Cody's voice cut through the conversation. Masters, we've got movement topside. Clone patrol, heavy armor. They're sweeping the area directly above us. Everyone froze. Through the Force, Obi-Wan reached out and felt the clone troopers above, 12 of them, moving in standard search patterns. Their presence was accompanied by something else, a dark, seeking intelligence that swept through the area like a predator's gaze. Vader's sent Inquisitors, Shaak Ti breathed. Force sensitives trained to hunt Jedi. They must suspect something. The Inquisitors were a new development, former Jedi who had been turned to the dark side or captured and tortured into service. Reports from Jedi survivors describe them as relentless hunters with specialized training in anti-Jedi tactics. If they were searching the area, it meant Imperial intelligence had picked up some indication of the rescue attempt. We need to move now, Quinlan hissed, before they narrow the search. Dex isn't finished cutting through, Obi-Wan replied. Then we make him finished. Quinlan ignited his lightsaber, the green blade carefully shrouded by his robes to prevent the glow from alerting anyone above. He moved to where Dex and Echo were working, adding his lightsaber's cutting power to their plasma torch. The sealed bulkhead began to glow red, then white. Metal peeled away in curling strips that hissed and sparked. Above them, the Inquisitor's presence grew stronger, more focused. They were getting closer. 30 seconds, Dex muttered, his forearms moving with desperate speed. We don't have 30 seconds, Cody said. He'd moved to a position where he could watch the tunnel behind them. His blaster rifle trained on the darkness. I can hear them cutting through the upper access points. They're coming down. Keep working, Obi-Wan ordered. He turned to Ayla and Shaak Ti. When they breach, we hold them here. By Dex time to finish. The two Jedi Masters nodded and took up positions flanking the tunnel entrance. Their lightsabers remained unignited but ready. The Force swirled around them as they prepared for combat. The sound of cutting metal grew louder from behind them. Imperial forces breaching the tunnel system from multiple access points. Then came voices, distorted by helmet speakers, sweep pattern Aurek. Execute on my mark. Done, Dex announced. The bulkhead fell inward with a crash that echoed through the tunnels. Beyond it, a narrow maintenance corridor led upward into the palace's lower levels. Go, Obi-Wan ordered. Dex, take point. Cody, your men provide rear guard. Jedi in the middle. They poured through the opening just as the first Inquisitor dropped into the tunnel behind them. The Darksider wore black armor decorated with red sigils, their face hidden behind a helmet similar to Vader's, but sleeker, more refined. Twin lightsaber blades, both crimson, ignited with a snap hiss that promised violence. Jedi scum, The Inquisitor hissed. Lord Vader will reward me well for your heads. Quinlan Vos was the last through the opening. He turned, his own lightsaber blazing green, and met the Inquisitor's first strike with a shower of sparks. You want our heads? Come and take them. The two Force wielders clashed in the narrow tunnel, their blades moving too fast for normal eyes to follow. But Quinlan was a veteran of the Clone Wars, a master of Form 7 lightsaber combat, and despite the Inquisitor's dark side ferocity, he was outmatched. 3 strikes. 4. On the 5th, Quinlan's blade found an opening and carved through the Inquisitor's shoulder. The Darksider screamed and stumbled backward, giving Quinlan the opening he needed to retreat through the bulkhead. Seal it, he shouted. Echo was already moving, his cybernetic arm interfacing with the door's ancient control systems. The bulkhead groaned, as motors that hadn't been used in centuries struggled to activate. Then, with a shriek of protesting metal, it began to close. The wounded Inquisitor lunged forward, trying to slip through the narrowing gap. Quinlan's lightsaber flashed once more, and the Inquisitor's head rolled free of its body, the helmet clattering across the corridor as the bulkhead sealed with a final, definitive clang. That'll hold them for maybe 5 minutes, Echo reported. The door's locked, but they'll cut through eventually. 5 minutes is all we need, Obi-Wan said. Dex, the detention level. 2 floors up, then east corridor for about 100 meters. If the schematics are accurate, and they'd better be, we'll come out right. Near the cell block, we're there. Holding Master Yoda, they moved quickly through corridors that grew progressively, less ancient and more functional. The palace's lower levels had been updated over the centuries, but these maintenance passages remained largely unchanged, utilitarian spaces, meant for droids and service workers, not important enough to warrant surveillance systems, until they turned a corner and found themselves face to face with a squad of stormtroopers conducting routine patrols. For a frozen moment, both groups stared at each other in surprise. Then training kicked in. Contact, the lead stormtrooper shouted, raising his blaster. He never got the shot off. Cody's blaster spoke first, a 3-round burst that dropped the trooper before he could fire. The other clones opened up in perfect synchronization, their shots precise and lethal. Within seconds, all 8 stormtroopers were down. So much for stealth, Ayla muttered. We knew it was going to get loud eventually, Quinlan replied. He was already moving toward the bodies, using his psychometric abilities to read impressions from their armor. These are new recruits, natural-born, not clones. Their memories are limited. They don't know anything useful. But their deaths will trigger an alarm, Shaak Ti pointed out. Imperial intelligence will know we're here. Then we move faster. Obi-Wan broke into a run, his Jedi-enhanced speed carrying him up a maintenance stairwell 3 steps at a time. The others followed, their footsteps echoing in the confined space. They emerged on the detention level into chaos. Red emergency lights strobed, alarm klaxons wailed, and at the end of the corridor, blocking the path to the cell block, stood a full platoon of stormtroopers, 30 soldiers in white armor, arranged in defensive positions with heavy weapons emplacements. Behind them, visible through the transparent steel of a cell door, sat Master Yoda. The ancient Jedi's eyes opened as he felt his rescuers' presence through the Force. A small smile crossed his wrinkled features. About time, Yoda said to himself. Worried, I was beginning to be. Obi-Wan ignited his lightsaber, the blue blade casting sharp shadows across the corridor. To his left and right, Ayla, Quinlan, and Shaak Ti did the same, blue, green, and blue blades creating a wall of light against the darkness. Last chance, Obi-Wan called to the stormtroopers. Stand aside and let us pass. No one else needs to die today. The platoon commander's response was to order. Open fire. 30 blasters spoke as one, filling the corridor with crimson energy bolts. The Jedi moved as one as well, their lightsabers weaving intricate patterns of defense. Blaster bolts deflected back toward their sources. Stormtroopers fell, struck by their own reflected shots. Behind the Jedi, Cody and his clone brothers added their fire to the chaos. These weren't stormtroopers. These were Clone Wars veterans, men who had fought beside Jedi for 3 years. They knew how to coordinate with Force wielders, knew when to shoot and when to hold fire. The battle became a brutal dance of light and death in the confined space. Obi-Wan advanced methodically, his Form 3 defensive style deflecting every shot that came his way. Quinlan fought with aggressive fury, his Form 7 acrobatics carrying him into the midst of the enemy ranks. Ayla and Shock T provided covering fire, their blades moving in perfect synchronization to protect the advancing clone troopers. Within 90 seconds, the platoon was broken. Half the stormtroopers lay dead or wounded. The rest retreated to secondary positions, their training unable to overcome the supernatural abilities of Force wielders working in concert. Gregor planted an explosive charge on the cell door. Clear. The charge detonated with a concussive whump that knocked the transparasteel door inward. Obi-Wan rushed through, his lightsaber raised against potential threats. Master Yoda sat calmly on his bench, his small hands folded in his lap. Master Kenobi, punctual as always, you are not. Despite everything, despite the battle raging in the corridor, despite the certainty that more Imperial forces were converging on their position, Obi-Wan found himself smiling. Master, we've come to get you out. Noticed, I have. Yoda stood, accepting his lightsaber from Obi-Wan's outstretched hand. The weapon felt familiar in his grip, like greeting an old friend. The trial, what of it? Starting in approximately 30 minutes, Obi-Wan replied. We're cutting it close. And Vader, preparing to present you to the Senate as proof of Imperial justice. He doesn't know we're here yet. No, soon he will. Yoda's ears twitched, his version of a wry smile. Sense us through the Force, he can. Already suspicious, he must be. As if summoned by the words, a presence descended upon them like a crushing weight. Every Force-sensitive being in the corridor felt it. Simultaneously, a dark star of rage and power, drawing closer with terrifying speed. He knows, Ayla breathed. Then we run, Quinlan said. Because fighting Vader in his own fortress is suicide. They retreated back down the corridor, Yoda moving with surprising speed for his small size and advanced age. Behind them, they could hear the distinctive sound of Vader's mechanical breathing growing closer, accompanied by the heavy footfalls of his boots and the snap hiss of his lightsaber igniting. This way, Dex called, pointing to a service lift. It's our only shot. They piled into the lift, 13 beings crammed into a space designed for 4. The doors began to close just as Vader rounded the corner, his crimson blade raised, his mask's lenses glowing with the reflection of emergency lights. Their eyes met, Obi-Wan and Vader, master and former student, Jedi and Sith, across the shrinking gap of the closing lift doors. Obi-Wan, Vader's voice was barely audible over his breathing. A single word that carried decades of history, brotherhood, and betrayal. Then the doors sealed, and the lift began its descent into the palace's depths, carrying Master Yoda and his rescuers away from the trap that had been set for them. But they weren't safe yet. Not by a long shot. Above them, Darth Vader stood in the empty corridor and ignited a second lightsaber, taken from a fallen Jedi he'd hunted the previous day. He drove both blades into the lift shaft's control panel, his rage manifesting as pure destruction. The hunt had begun. The service lift plummeted through the Imperial Palace's infrastructure. Emergency brakes screaming as Vader's sabotage sent it into freefall. Sparks showered from the ceiling where control circuits overloaded. The lights flickered once, twice, then died completely, plunging the 13 occupants into darkness broken only by the glow of lightsabers. Brace, Cody shouted. Obi-Wan reached out through the Force, wrapping the lift car in a cushion of telekinetic energy. Ayla, Shock T, and Quinlan added their power to his. The 4 Jedi straining against momentum and mass. Yoda joined them, his small form radiating more Force energy than seemed possible from his size. The lift's descent slowed, not stopped. The mass was too great, the speed too fast, but slowed enough that when they hit the bottom of the shaft, the impact was survivable rather than fatal. The crash was still brutal. Metal shrieked. Bodies slammed against walls. Gregor's helmet cracked against the ceiling. Dex's 4 arms scrambled for purchase as the car tilted at a 45-degree angle, wedged between the shaft walls. For a moment, there was only the sound of labored breathing and the groan of stressed metal. Then Obi-Wan ignited his lightsaber fully, bathing the wreckage in blue light. Status report, he ordered, his Jedi healing trance already working to mend cracked ribs. Alive, Cody grunted, pulling himself up. Barely. Lost my rifle in the impact. I'm good, Kix reported, checking over his brothers. Tup's got a concussion. Echo's cybernetics took some damage. Gregor, he paused, examining the clone commando. Gregor's unconscious, but stable. The rest of us are functional, Ayla said, helping Shock T to her feet. The Togruta's montrals bore fresh scorch marks, but she waved off concern. Master Yoda? Obi-Wan turned to find the ancient Jedi already on his feet, seemingly unaffected by the crash. Fine, I am, Yoda said. Though compliment your piloting skills. I cannot. Despite the dire circumstances. His eyes twinkled with something that might have been amusement. We need to move, Quinlan said, using his lightsaber to cut through the lift's emergency hatch. Vader knows exactly where we are. He'll send everything he's got. Everything he's got turned out to be considerable. As they climbed from the wrecked lift into the sub-basement levels of the Imperial Palace, alarm klaxons continued to wail. Through the Force, Obi-Wan could feel multiple squads of stormtroopers converging on their position, guided by Vader's dark side presence, like hounds following a master's mental commands. But he also felt something else, a sudden surge of chaos from the levels above them, where the Senate trial was supposed to be beginning. Senator Organa has made his move, Shock T observed, sensing the same disturbance. Then we keep to the plan, Obi-Wan said. Dex, the tunnels? About 200 meters east, Dex replied, consulting his battered datapad. But we'll have to go through Imperial barracks to get there. The whole palace is on lockdown. Through. Then, Obi-Wan looked at his assembled team, Jedi Masters scarred by war, clone troopers freed from mental slavery, and a basilisk information broker who had risked everything to help. We've come too far to stop now. They moved through corridors that were transforming before their eyes. Blast doors sealed behind them as automated security protocols activated. Automated turrets descended from ceiling mounts, their targeting sensors painting red dots across the group. Environmental systems began venting atmosphere, attempting to suffocate intruders. The Jedi dealt with these obstacles through the Force and their lightsabers. Turrets exploded before they could fire, their circuits overloaded by telekinetic pressure. Blast doors opened at Obi-Wan's mental command, their access codes read directly from their control systems through psychometry. Atmosphere vents sealed as Shock T manipulated their mechanical components with precision that would have impressed the engineers who designed them. But these were delays, not solutions. Every second they spent fighting. Through the palaces, defenses was another second for Vader to organize a response. They emerged into the Imperial barracks to find it transformed into a fortress. 300 stormtroopers, an entire battalion, stood in parade formation, their blasters raised. Heavy weapons emplacements had been set up at key choke points. And standing at the center of it all, radiating dark side energy like a black sun, was Darth Vader. Obi-Wan, Vader said, his mechanical breathing the only sound in the vast chamber. I wondered if you would have the courage to face me, or if you would simply run, as you did on Mustafar. The reference to their last confrontation, when Obi-Wan had left. Anakin burning on a lava riverbank, hit like a physical blow. Obi-Wan had replayed that day 1,000 times in his mind. Wondered if there had been another way. Questioned whether leaving Anakin to die had been mercy or cowardice. I didn't run from you then, Obi-Wan said quietly, stepping forward from his group. I left you because I couldn't bring myself to end you. Because I hoped, foolishly, perhaps, that there was still good in you. Good. Vader's laugh was bitter and distorted by his mask. You left me to burn alive. You took my limbs, my lungs, my face. Everything I was, you destroyed. And you dare speak to me of good. You destroyed yourself. Anakin. Obi-Wan's voice carried pain that years hadn't dimmed. When you chose to serve Palpatine. When you murdered younglings. When you betrayed everything the Jedi Order stood for. I tried to stop you. I begged you to turn back. You wouldn't listen. Because you offered me nothing. Vader's rage manifested as visible distortion in the air around him, the Force itself recoiling from the intensity of his emotion. The Jedi Code forbade attachment. It demanded I watch Padme die without trying to save her. It made me a slave to rules that denied basic compassion. Palpatine offered power, freedom, the ability to shape my own destiny. He offered you lies, Yoda interjected, his small voice cutting through the tension. Twisted your fear into hatred, he did. Promised power to save Padme, but caused her death. Your fall did. See this, can you not? Vader's mask turned toward Yoda. You, the one who killed my master, who destroyed my chance to learn the power to save her. Your master was a Sith Lord, Yoda said simply. Orchestrated the Clone Wars, he did. Murdered millions. Enslaved the clones. Planned to destroy all Jedi. Stopped him, I had to. And in doing so, you ensured Padme's death. Vader's voice rose to a roar. Without Sidious's teachings, I had no way to save her. She died because of you. She died because of you. Obi-Wan said quietly. I was there, Anakin. I saw her after you force-choked her on Mustafar. She died of a broken heart, knowing what you'd become. Knowing that the man she loved had murdered children. Knowing that you'd chosen power over everything she believed in. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the stormtroopers seemed to hold their breath, sensing that this moment transcended mere combat. You're lying, Vader said, but his voice lacked conviction. Am I? Reach out through the Force. You know I'm telling the truth. You've always been able to sense when I lie to you. Vader stood motionless, his mechanical breathing the only sound. Through the Force, Obi-Wan felt the turmoil within his former student. Rage and grief and terrible, desperate hope warring with each other. It doesn't matter, Vader said finally. She's gone. The Jedi are destroyed. The Republic is dead. All that remains is the Empire. And you will surrender, Master Yoda, or I will kill every last one of you. No. The word came from Cody, who stepped forward to stand beside Obi-Wan. We won't. One by one, the others joined them. Kix and Echo, their blasters raised. Tup, still unsteady from his concussion, but standing firm. Ayla and Shak Ti, their lightsabers ignited. Quinlan, grinning like a man who'd found his purpose. Even Dex, his 4 arms empty of weapons, but his stance defiant. You're outnumbered 100 to 1, Vader observed. We've faced worse odds, Quinlan replied cheerfully. Remember the Battle of Boz Pity, Obi-Wan? We were outnumbered 200 to 1. Still won. We also had air support and artillery, Obi-Wan pointed out. Details. Quinlan's grin widened. Besides, we've got something better this time. We've got the high ground. Despite everything, despite the army arrayed against them, despite facing Vader himself, Obi-Wan found himself suppressing a smile. Trust Quinlan to make a joke about Mustafar at a moment like this. Enough, Vader said. He raised his lightsaber, and 300 stormtroopers tensed. This is your last chance. Surrender or... The ceiling exploded. Debris rained down as a massive section of the barracks roof tore away, revealing the Senate chamber 3 floors above. And through that opening descended a sight that made even Vader pause, a stolen Imperial shuttle, its weapons blazing, providing covering fire as it settled into a hover above the rescue team. The shuttle's boarding ramp lowered. At the top stood Senator Bail Organa, a blaster pistol in his hand, likely the first time he'd held a weapon in decades. Beside him, pilot's goggles pushed up on his forehead, was a young man with sandy hair and a cocky grin. Need a ride? The pilot called down. Name's Han Solo. I'm here to rescue you. Who hired you? Obi-Wan shouted over the chaos of blaster fire. The senator. Don't worry, he's good for the credits. Han triggered the shuttle's weapons again, scattering the stormtrooper formation. Now get aboard before Vader decides to do something really dramatic. As if on cue, Vader thrust out both hands. The Force screamed in protest as the Sith Lord attempted to simply crush the shuttle through telekinetic power alone. The ship's hull groaned. Systems alarms wailed. But 5 Jedi Masters working in concert proved stronger. Obi-Wan, Yoda, Ayla, Shak Ti, and Quinlan combined their power, creating a shield of Force energy that deflected Vader's attack. It wasn't elegant. It wasn't sustainable, but it held long enough for the team to board. Cody went first, carrying the unconscious Gregor. Then Kix, Echo, and Tup. Dex scrambled up the ramp with surprising agility for his bulk. The Jedi Masters retreated in order, first Ayla, then Shak Ti, then Quinlan. Obi-Wan and Yoda were last. Go, Yoda commanded. Hold them off, I will. Master. An order, this is. Yoda's ancient eyes were hard. Need you, the order does. But fought Vader once, I have. Do so again, I can. You're not fighting him alone. Obi-Wan ignited his lightsaber, taking a position beside his old teacher. Vader advanced through his scattered stormtroopers. his rage so palpable it seemed to warp the air. Behind him, more Inquisitors emerged from side corridors, 5 of them, their spinning double-bladed lightsabers activated. Together, then, Yoda said. Master and former student moved as one. Yoda's Form 4. Acrobatics and Obi-Wan's Form 3. Defense complemented each other perfectly, creating a defensive barrier that even Vader couldn't immediately penetrate. Their lightsabers wove patterns of blue and green light, deflecting the Sith Lord's crimson blade and the Inquisitor's attacks. For 30 seconds, an eternity in lightsaber combat, they held. Then Vader changed tactics. Instead of attacking them, he attacked the shuttle. Force lightning erupted from his hands, not the weak electrical discharge of an apprentice, but genuine Sith lightning that could kill with prolonged exposure. It arced across the distance between Vader and the hovering shuttle, wrapping around its engines. "We're losing power," Han shouted from the cockpit. "I can't hold position much longer." "Go," Obi-Wan commanded. "Get everyone out." "Not without you," Bail Organa replied. Obi-Wan and Yoda looked at each other. A lifetime of training and trust passed between them in that glance. Then they moved. Yoda launched himself at Vader. With all the force his small body could generate, a spinning attack that forced the Sith Lord to stop his lightning assault and defend himself. In that opening, Obi-Wan leaped straight up, using the force to propel himself the 15 meters to the shuttle's ramp. He caught the edge with one hand and pulled himself aboard. "Master Yoda." Now, Yoda disengaged from Vader with a final force push that sent the Sith Lord sliding backward across the durasteel floor. Then the ancient Jedi Master jumped, higher than should have been possible, faster than Vader could react, and soared through the air. Obi-Wan caught him, and the shuttle was already moving, Han Solo pushing the engines to their maximum as they climbed through the shattered ceiling and into Coruscant sky. Below, in the wreckage of the Imperial barracks, Darth Vader stood among his defeated troops and watched the shuttle escape. He could have pursued, could have commandeered a starfighter and given chase, could have used the Force to tear the shuttle from the sky. Instead, he stood perfectly still, his mechanical breathing echoing in the vast chamber. "Lord Vader," Grand Moff Tarkin's voice came through his comlink. "What are your orders?" "Let them go," Vader said quietly. "My lord," I said, "let them go." Vader's fists clenched at his sides. "They've rescued Yoda. They've made their statement. But this isn't over. Far from it. Order all Imperial forces to track that shuttle. Find out where they're going. And prepare the fleet." "The fleet, my lord." "The Jedi have made their move," Vader said, his voice cold with purpose. "Now we make ours. It's time to show the galaxy what happens to those who defy the Empire." He turned and walked from the barracks, his cape billowing behind him, already planning his response. The rescue had succeeded, but the war had only just begun. The stolen Imperial shuttle broke through Coruscant's atmosphere, leaving behind the glittering city planet and the Empire's seat of power. In the cockpit, Han Solo worked the controls with practiced efficiency, plotting a hyperspace jump that would take them far from Imperial pursuit. Beside him, Bail Organa monitored sensor readings, his diplomatic composure cracking under the strain of what they'd just accomplished. "We've got 4 TIE fighters on our tail," Bail reported, "and at least 3 Star Destroyers moving to intercept." "I see them," Han replied, his hands dancing across the navicomputer. "Just need 30 more seconds for the calculations to finish." Jumping to hyperspace without proper coordinates is a good way to fly through a star. In the passenger compartment, Obi-Wan administered basic first aid to the injured while Yoda sat in meditation, his small form centered and calm despite the chaos they'd just escaped. The other Jedi tended to the clone troopers, using Force healing wear, appropriate and traditional medical supplies were necessary. "That," Quinlan Voss said, checking his lightsaber for damage, "was possibly the stupidest thing we've ever done. And I've done some monumentally stupid things. Worked, did it not?" Yoda's eyes opened, fixing Quinlan with an amused stare. "Barely, if that smuggler hadn't shown up." "Pilot," Han called back from the cockpit. "I'm a pilot. Smugglers are people who transport illegal cargo. I just fly ships very well." "And who exactly hired you?" Obi-Wan asked, moving forward to address Bail Organa. The senator had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "I made some inquiries through unofficial channels. Asked if anyone knew a pilot skilled enough, and crazy enough to fly an unauthorized extraction from the Imperial Palace. Solo's name came up repeatedly, usually followed by descriptions like reckless, talented, and has outstanding debts to multiple criminal organizations. Hey, Han protested. Those debts are under negotiation, and I prefer calculated risk-taker to reckless. You flew into the Imperial Palace, Ayla pointed out. For a very generous fee, Han countered, which the senator assured me he could pay. We are still good for that payment, right? If we survive the next 10 minutes, I'll make sure you're compensated, Bale promised. Good enough for me. Han's console beeped. Hyperspace calculations complete. Everyone hold on to something. The stars outside the viewport elongated into white streaks as the shuttle made the jump to light speed. The pursuing TIE fighters and Star Destroyers vanished, left behind in real space while the shuttle traveled through the otherworldly dimension of hyperspace. For the first time since the rescue began, there was silence. Not the tense silence of preparation or the chaotic quiet after battle, but genuine peace. They had done it. Against impossible odds. They had infiltrated the Imperial Palace and rescued Grand Master Yoda. So, Han said, swiveling his chair to face the passenger compartment. Where exactly am I taking you people? Because if it's anywhere near Imperial space, I'm charging extra. Obi-Wan looked at Yoda. The ancient Jedi Master had said nothing during the escape, conserving his strength and maintaining his center in the Force. Now he opened his eyes fully and addressed the assembled group. A question, that is, Yoda said. Where go from here? The Empire established it is. The Jedi, scattered they are. The Republic, dead it is. What now? It was Bail Organa who answered first. Now we build something new. Not the Republic. That government failed because it became complacent, corrupt, blind to the threats growing within it. But something better. A rebellion. An alliance of worlds and individuals who refuse to accept imperial tyranny. A rebellion. Mon Mothma's voice came through the shuttle's communication system. Bail had apparently established a secure channel during the escape. Senator Organa and I have been discussing this possibility for some time. With Palpatine dead and Vader consolidating power, there's an opportunity to organize resistance before the Empire becomes truly unassailable. Organize with what? Cody asked pragmatically. Ma'am, with respect, we've got maybe 100 Jedi left in the entire galaxy. The clone army is either still under chip control or psychologically shattered from what they were forced to do. The Senate just voted itself into dictatorship. What resources do we have? More than you think, Bail replied. There are senators who oppose the Empire but voted for it out of fear. Planetary defense forces that don't want to become imperial garrisons. Corporate interests that see the Empire's centralization as a threat to their autonomy. Criminal organizations that don't want imperial regulation. And most importantly, billions of ordinary citizens who remember what the Republic was supposed to stand for. Politics and economics, Quinlan said skeptically. That's your foundation for a rebellion? Every successful revolution begins with politics and economics. Mon Mothma countered. Military force matters, yes. But sustained resistance requires popular support, financial resources, and diplomatic legitimacy. We can provide those things. Shakti spoke up, her voice thoughtful. And the Jedi? What role do we play in this rebellion? We're not soldiers, or rather, we weren't supposed to be. The Clone Wars turned us into generals and warriors. Do we make the same mistake again? No, Yoda said firmly. Repeat the past, we must not. Generals of the Republic, we became. Lost our way, we did. Forgotten our true purpose, to serve the Force, to bring balance, to help those in need. But the Empire won't leave us alone, Ayla pointed out. Vader is hunting Jedi survivors. The Inquisitors are being trained specifically to kill us. We can't just hide and meditate while the galaxy burns. Hide? We will not, Yoda agreed. But fighters, we will not only be. Teachers, healers, guides. These, we must become again. Train a new generation, we must. Not as soldiers, but as peacekeepers. Learn from our mistakes, we will. Obi-Wan listened to this exchange and felt something shifting in his understanding. For years during the Clone Wars, he had been uncomfortable with the Jedi's role as military commanders. It had felt wrong, a perversion of what the Order was meant to be. But he had accepted it as necessary, as the price of defending the Republic. Now, with the Republic dead and the Jedi scattered, perhaps there was an opportunity to rebuild something truer to the Order's original purpose. We'll need a base, he said. Somewhere remote enough that the Empire won't find us easily, but accessible enough that we can coordinate resistance efforts. I have a suggestion, Bale said. Alderaan's moon has extensive cave systems. We could establish a hidden facility there. My government would provide protection and resources. Too obvious, Han interjected. Vader knows you helped with the rescue. He'll monitor Alderaan closely. You need somewhere unexpected. Somewhere the Empire wouldn't think to look. Like where? Kix asked. Han's grin was distinctly predatory. I know a place. Outer Rim world. Barely habitable. No strategic value. Used to be a separatist holdout during the war, which means it's got underground facilities and defensive installations. The Empire wrote it off as not worth occupying. Perfect for a secret base. And you know about this place how? Quinlan asked suspiciously. I may have used it to store cargo that various governments considered questionable. Han shrugged. Point is, it's hidden, it's functional, and the Empire doesn't care about it. You want to build a rebellion, that's where you start. Yoda's ears twitched, his version of a smile. Wisdom from unexpected sources sometimes comes. This smuggler. Pilot, Han corrected automatically. This pilot speaks sense. A hidden base, we need. Train in secret, we must. Build strength before confront the Empire, we will. Then it's decided, Bale said. We'll establish a base on this Outer Rim world. Coordinate with other resistance cells. Begin recruiting allies and resources. He paused, his voice becoming heavier. But we need to be clear about what we're committing to. This isn't a short-term effort. Building a rebellion capable of challenging the Empire will take years, possibly decades. Many of us won't live to see its success. All the more reason to begin now, Mon Mothma said. Before the Empire becomes so entrenched that resistance is impossible. Obi-Wan looked around the passenger compartment. At Yoda, ancient and wise, carrying the weight of the Order's failures and hopes for its future. At his fellow Jedi Masters, scarred by war but unbroken. At the clone troopers who had broken free of their programming and chosen to fight for something they believed in. At Bail Organa, a senator who had risked everything to stand against tyranny. At Dex, an information broker who had abandoned his comfortable life to help. And at Han Solo, a pilot with outstanding debts and questionable morals who had nevertheless flown into the Imperial Palace to rescue people he'd never met. This was their rebellion. Not an army, not a government, just a small group of beings who refused to accept that the darkness had won. There's something else we need to address, Ayla said quietly. Vader, Anakin, he's going to keep hunting us. Keep killing Jedi. We can't just run forever. Confront him, we must, Yoda agreed. But not yet. Stronger, we must become. Understand him better, we must. And perhaps, the ancient Jedi's expression became distant. Perhaps reach him, we still can. Master, he murdered children, Quinlan said flatly. He led the attack on the temple. He's serving the Empire. At what point do we accept that Anakin Skywalker is gone and only Darth Vader remains? When hope dies completely, accept that we will, Yoda replied. But while live hope does, try we must. The Chosen One, prophecy named him. Bring balance to the Force, he was meant to. Failed, perhaps he has. Or perhaps. Yoda trailed off, his gaze turning inward. Perhaps his path is longer than we thought. Perhaps balance comes not through light alone, but through a journey through darkness and back to light. That's a hell of a gamble, Han muttered. Betting the galaxy. On the idea that the guy who's currently hunting, you might eventually turn good. Gambling, the Force often requires, Yoda said with that small smile. But guided by the Force, our gambles are. Trust in it, we must. The shuttle continued through hyperspace, carrying its unlikely cargo toward an uncertain future. Behind them, on Coruscant, Darth Vader stood in his private chambers and stared out at the city planet that now served as the Empire's capital. He had felt Obi-Wan's presence during the rescue, had fought his old master briefly, and in that moment of combat, something had stirred within him. Not redemption, not even doubt, but recognition. The man who had trained him, who had been his brother, was still out there, still fighting, and deep within the armor that confined him Within the darkness that consumed him, a small part of Anakin Skywalker whispered a question he couldn't quite silence. What if Obi-Wan was right? What if Padme really had died because of what he'd become, not because of what Yoda had done? Vader crushed that thought ruthlessly. Doubt was weakness. Questioning was vulnerability. He was Darth Vader, Dark Lord of the Sith, Emperor of the Galactic Empire. The past was dead. Only power remained. But in the quiet moments between orders and battles, in the silence of his meditation chamber, that whisper remained, and it would not be silenced. The shuttle dropped out of hyperspace above a gray, unremarkable planet that registered on no major star charts. Its surface was scarred by ancient bombardment, its atmosphere thin but breathable. Ancient separatist installations dotted the landscape, abandoned and forgotten. "Welcome to your new home," Han announced. "I'd say it's beautiful, but I prefer not to lie to customers." "It's perfect," Bail Organa said, studying the sensor readings. "Remote. Defensible. Exactly what we need." As the shuttle descended toward the surface, Yoda stood and moved to the viewport. Below, he could see the ruins of war, remnants of the conflict that had consumed the galaxy for 3 years. But he could also see potential, space for growth, opportunity for rebuilding. "Begin here, we do," Yoda said quietly. "And here, we will not. A long road ahead, there is. Many battles, we will fight. Much suffering, we will endure. But give up, we will not. While one Jedi remains, while one being stands against tyranny, hope survives." The shuttle touched down on the gray soil. The boarding ramp lowered, and the first members of the Rebel Alliance stepped out onto a world that would become legendary. They didn't know it yet, couldn't know that. This moment would be remembered as the beginning of a struggle that would last decades and ultimately bring down the Empire. They only knew that they had a choice: surrender to darkness or fight for light. They chose to fight, and in a galaxy gripped by tyranny, that choice made all the difference. The death of Darth Sidious at Yoda's hands changed the galaxy in ways that no one could have predicted. The Emperor's grand design, an empire that would last 1,000 years, built on the ashes of the Jedi Order, fractured before it truly began. Without Sidious's supernatural influence reinforcing Order 66, the clone army split. Some continued to serve the Empire. Others broke free, haunted by what they had done. Still others simply walked away, unable to reconcile their crimes with their consciousness. Darth Vader became Emperor, but it was an empire built on rage rather than vision. He hunted Jedi with relentless fury, killing dozens in the months following Yoda's rescue. But he could never find them all. The survivors had learned from their mistakes. They had better, fought smarter, and slowly, carefully, they began to rebuild. The Rebel Alliance grew from that gray world's ruins. Senators who opposed the Empire joined. Clone troopers who had broken free of their programming enlisted. Planetary defense forces, criminal organizations, and ordinary citizens who remembered freedom all came together under a simple banner: hope. Years later, historians would debate whether Yoda's decision to kill Palpatine was ultimately the right choice. It had prevented the fully realized empire that Sidious envisioned. But it had also created Darth Vader, a Dark Lord driven by personal anguish rather than grand strategy, making him in some ways more dangerous because he was unpredictable. Master Yoda never spoke publicly about that moment in the Senate chamber. But in private meditation with Obi-Wan, he once admitted, "Perfect, my choice was not. Right, perhaps it was not. But necessary it was. And live with the consequences, we must. For better or worse, change the galaxy we have. Shape what comes next, now we must." The war between the Rebel Alliance and the Galactic Empire would continue for decades. Millions would die, worlds would burn. But unlike the timeline where Palpatine survived to craft a perfectly organized tyranny, this empire had cracks from the beginning. And through those cracks, light could enter. As for Anakin Skywalker, the ghost that haunted Darth Vader's armor, he remained trapped between darkness and the fading memory of who he had been. Some nights, he would stand in his meditation chamber and reach out through the Force, searching for Padme's presence, hoping against all reason that she might somehow still live. She never answered. But sometimes, just sometimes, he felt something else, a small, flickering presence that seemed to carry her essence. Two presences, actually. Young, innocent, hidden. somewhere in the Force, where he couldn't quite reach. He told himself it was a phantom, a trick of the dark side. The dead did not return. But deep down, in the part of him that was still Anakin, he wondered. And in that wondering, the seed of redemption remained, dormant but alive. The Force works in mysterious ways. It had brought Yoda and Palpatine together in that Senate chamber. It had guided Yoda's blade to strike true. And perhaps, in ways no one could yet see, it was still working toward the balance that prophecy had promised. The galaxy far, far away continued to turn. The war continued. The suffering continued. But so did hope. And in a universe defined by the eternal struggle between light and darkness, hope is sometimes all you need.